Chapter 1333. Sure enough, the fourth stage of the army character formula is still in terms of speed. The original angel wings have evolved into demon wings. After the breakthrough of the Zai character formula, the army character formula had also finally broken through. So far, 5 of the 9 syllables that Murong-yu cultivated had all advanced, and each of them gave Murong-yu a huge surprise. Just the breakthrough of the army character formula had already made Murong-yu unable to contain his joy. After the angel wings evolved into demon wings, there was not only a huge change in speed, and now there was an extra pair of wings. Originally, with only 1 pair of wings, Murong-yu's speed had already surpassed the speed of an undead stage expert. And now, with 2 pairs of wings, his speed had skyrocketed. Although he had not tested it yet, Murong-yu had a feeling. Now, even an ordinary Shin immortal speed was far inferior to his. If coupled with the void travel, even an ancient sage would have a hard time against him. As long as he did not face a super expert of the Sage King stage, Murong-yu was almost invincible, and his realm was only at the peak of the 9th level Great Sage. What if he broke through to the undead stage in one go? Would he be able to fight a super expert of the Sage King stage? Murong-yu was looking forward to it, and he also knew the result. Because at the same time that the army character formula broke through, the invisible huge barrier between the Great Sage stage and the undead stage was already on the verge of collapse. As long as Murong-yu attacked a few times, the huge invisible barrier would be shattered, and he would step into the undead stage. Undead stage, I'm coming, Murong-yu shouted in his heart, and began to guide the raging power in his body to attack the invisible barrier. Rumble, everything happened naturally. With just a single impact, the huge barrier was shattered. Rumble, at the moment of the breakthrough, a thunderous sound came from Murong-yu's body. A terrifying aura more than 10 times stronger than before rushed out his body. Bang! 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 Yu Mengqing and the others, who had been sitting cross-legged beside Murong-yu, had no time to react. They were sent flying by Murong-yu's powerful aura. Fortunately, this aura was unintentionally released by Murong-yu when he was breaking through, so it didn't contain much killing intent. Otherwise, Yu Mengqing and the others would have been injured. After sending Yu Mengqing and the others flying, Murong-yu's enormous aura continued to sweep out in all directions like a torrent. Immediately, the others who were cultivating near the stone tablet were alerted. Numerous gazes tore through the void and landed on Murong-yu. However, they quickly retracted their gazes. It was just a breakthrough from the peak of the Great Sage realm to the first stage of the undead realm, nothing special. They didn't think that Murong-yu had broken through because he had comprehended the cultivation method on the stone tablet. This was because there was nothing strange about the huge stone tablet. Moreover, when Murong-yu came in, he was already at the peak of the Great Sage realm. Now, he was just taking the last step. However, what they didn't know was that because of the cultivation method on the stone tablet, Murong-yu's strength had skyrocketed several times. Not only had his life-saving ability increased substantially, but even his combat strength had also shown an explosive increase. Has he finally broken through? Unlike the others who were indifferent, the women were overjoyed. Murong-yu had stepped into the undead realm and finally became immortal in the true sense. This was worthy of their joy. After all, who didn't want to be immortal? The longer they lived, the more they yearned for immortality. This was the lifelong goal of countless people. However, Murong-yu's goal was not just immortality. It was just the first stage of the undead realm. No more, no less. Murong-yu felt a little helpless. At this time, the violent aura emanating from his body had all been restrained. However, because he didn't have enough strength, this breakthrough only allowed him to break through to the first stage of the undead realm. If he had enough strength, Murong-yu might be able to break through several small realms. At the very least, reaching the 3rd stage of the undead realm wouldn't be a problem at all. However, the breakthrough in his realm had already exceeded Murong-yu's expectations. He originally thought that he would need to smelt some best quality sacred tools to break through, I'm afraid that it will be impossible to quickly improve my realm in the future. At the very least, I will need to smelt a best quality sacred tool or the crystal core of a profound sage-level vicious beast to increase my strength. As for high-grade sacred tools and crystal cores of vicious beasts below the profound sage level, I'm afraid that they won't have any effect. Moronyu thought in his heart and couldn't help but worry. Before entering the desert of death, when I was at the peak of the great sage realm, I could easily kill a powerhouse at the peak of the undead realm. After the battle character art broke through, I had the power to fight against undead realm powerhouses. Now that I've broken through to the undead realm, I can easily kill a powerhouse at the peak of the undead realm. Even a profound, sage-level powerhouse might not be impossible to kill. Murongyu's heart was restless, and he almost couldn't help but want to find a profound sage to fight. In addition to the substantial increase in his fighting strength, Murongyu's speed had also soared several times. Perhaps no one under the Saint King realm would be able to surpass his speed. After spending half a day to consolidate his new realm, Murongyu's consciousness spread out and covered the stone tablet. Morongyu had been curious about the cultivation method on the stone tablet for a long time. If it weren't for various breakthroughs, he would have already cultivated this cultivation method. However, when he came into contact with the stone tablet, Murongyu's heart moved. In the past, every time he obtained the 9 secret words, there would be a huge vision of heaven and earth. Once a vision appeared, it would undoubtedly tell others that he had comprehended the cultivation method that no one had comprehended for countless years. How could others endure this? Perhaps some people would only feel unhappy and surprised, but there would definitely be people who would have evil intentions. I'm going to comprehend the cultivation method on the stone tablet. You all enter my treasure space first. Muronyu pondered for a moment and decided to put everyone into the Hichu Luo Shu. Big scoundrel, are you sure you can comprehend the cultivation method on the stone tablet? This is something that no one has been able to comprehend for countless years. The little loli looked at Muronyu, half believing and half doubting. I'm 100% sure, Muronyu said confidently. If he had never cultivated the 9 secret words, he would also be in the dark and not know where to start. However, the 9 secret words were quite strange. The more one cultivated one of the 9 secret words, the easier it would be to comprehend the other words. It was just like how Muronyu already knew that the cultivation method on the stone tablet was one of the 9 secret words when he first entered this small island. This stone tablet had stood here for countless eras, but no one knew what cultivation method it was. Even Muronyu was sure that even the supremes and rulers of the holy world had come to take a look. However, they didn't gain anything. Do you want to go in or not? Seeing the little loli still not willing to go in, Muronyu couldn't help but stare at her. The little loli immediately stared back at Muronyu. Not to be outdone, I don't believe it, so I want to see you comprehend it with my own eyes. Moreover, you don't need to worry about something happening to me. Even if something happens, it has nothing to do with you. Muronyu was so angry that his teeth hurt. However, what the little loli said was true. How many trump cards did she have? Muronyu didn't know. Therefore, he put Yu Mengqing and the others in, leaving only the little loli and the others. Seeing Murongyu's actions, the surrounding people looked over with suspicion. However, Muronyu had already sat down cross-legged, and his divine sense had already extended into the stone tablet. There were countless divine senses on the stone tablet, and all of them were stronger than Murongyu's. When they saw Murongyu's actions, they couldn't help but sneer. If it was so easy to enter the stone tablet, they would have already gone in. Why would they keep lingering on the surface of the stone tablet? However, their expressions soon froze because they saw Murongyu's divine sense pierce through the stone tablet and directly rush in. Impossible! How is this possible? Could it be that the stone tablet can be entered? Countless people were shocked. Therefore, one by one, their divine senses tried to enter the stone tablet. However, they soon discovered that they couldn't enter at all. Could it be that he comprehended this cultivation method? Everyone had the opposite thought. Then, almost everyone's gazes landed on Muronyu. Some were envious, some were jealous, and most of all, resentful. They had comprehended it for so many years, but they didn't even get a single strand of it. Murong, you had only been here for less than a month, right? Not only did he have a breakthrough in his strength, but he also comprehended this magical cultivation method. This was definitely a huge blow to them. How could they endure this? Moreover, many magical cultivation methods would disappear immediately once they were comprehended. Once the cultivation method disappeared, they wouldn't be able to get a single strand of it. We definitely can't let him comprehend it. Some people had already stood up and walked towards Murongyu with a ferocious expression. If he can comprehend this cultivation method, if I can't control him, then wouldn't I be able to get this cultivation method too? In an instant, no matter what kind of mentality they had, they slowly closed in on Murongyu. However, at the same time, their divine senses attached to the stone tablet were still working hard. However, at that moment, boom, the stone tablet, which had been calm all this time, suddenly exploded with a deafening sound. At the same time, a glaring holy light burst out from the stone tablet. It was as bright as the sun in the sky, instantly dazzling everyone's eyes. At the same time, an extremely powerful force rushed out from the stone tablet, directly repelling everyone's divine senses except for Murongyu from the stone tablet. What's going on? Shocked by the sudden change, everyone present turned pale with fright and looked at the huge stone tablet that stood between heaven and earth. Even little Lolita, who was originally disdainful, looked at the stone tablet in shock. Did the big bad guy really comprehend that cultivation method? Chapter 1334. The holy light on the steel became more and more resplendent, to the point that everyone couldn't open their eyes. Waves after waves of powerful and terrifying auras erupted from the stone tablet, sweeping across the land and everything in its path. But soon, everyone was surprised to find that the steel had become illusory. Originally, they were in the vicinity of the steel, and some of them were even under the huge steel. But now, they were shocked to find that although they were very close to the steel, it was as if the steel was at the end of the world. It was as if the two were not in the same space-time. What's going on? Seeing this scene, everyone was shocked. Even those who were looking for trouble with Murongyu stopped in their tracks. While they were puzzled, these experts extended their immense divine senses over. But soon they were shocked. When a steel had changed, their divine senses had only been bounced off. But now, their divine senses were illusory, and they didn't encounter any resistance. An ancient sage couldn't help but exclaim, "The steel is gone. There's only emptiness in my divine sense." His divine sense covered the world, and even the entire island. But where was the steel? If that's the case, what happened? How could this be? After a while, everyone had a sluggish look on their faces. No one could feel the existence of the steel anymore. But although the huge steel was emitting a powerful aura and radiating holy light, it didn't move at all. However, he didn't move from his original position. They all saw it clearly. It must have blocked the divine sense. A profound sage growled in disbelief. He took a step forward and rushed forward, reaching out his hand to grab the huge steel. Things like this, which could be seen with the eyes but not with the divine sense, often happened in the holy world. Some special treasures or super powerhouses were clearly standing in front of them, and they could be seen with their eyes, but there was no reaction when they scanned with their divine sense. Because of the isolation of the divine sense, or the power of the powerhouse, the divine sense that came in contact with the steel automatically bypassed them. It was like a mirror reflecting light. There's nothing. The profound sage who rushed to the front of the huge steel directly grabbed it with his hand. However, he failed to grab anything. In fact, he grabbed nothing but air. However, in his eyes, his hand had already sunk into the stone tablet. But his hand didn't feel any obstruction. The profound sage withdrew his hand in disbelief and then grabbed another handful. However, the result was the same. What's going on? The profound sage was shocked. At this moment, countless experts had already rushed up and reached out with their hands. However, the result was the same as that profound sage. It seems like we're no longer in the same space, a saint ruler said as he looked at the huge stone tablet. They were not in the same space, so even if they could see it, they could not touch it. It was like fishing for the moon in the water. Although it looked like the moon was in the water, the real moon was high up in the sky. What they saw was just an illusion. However, for countless years, such a thing had never happened to the stone tablet. Why would it suddenly happen now? Could it be because of that brat? Thinking up to this point, everyone's gazes shot toward Muronyu. A saint ruler reached his hand into the illusion of the stone tablet and suddenly exclaimed, "No, did you notice that the time inside the stone tablet is different from ours?" Hearing this, many people also reached their hands into the illusion. Then, they suddenly realized, if that's the case, the flow of time inside the stone tablet is at least 10 times faster than ours. And it's only 10 times faster than ours. Not long after, everyone came to this conclusion. A saint ruler who had not spoken for a long time suddenly said, "This stone tablet is still in the same space as us, but not in the same space-time." Hearing this, the other saint rulers nodded thoughtfully, but the others looked at the saint ruler with puzzled expressions. It was understandable that they were in different spaces. Just like the holy world and the divine world, they were originally two different spaces. But what was with space-time? This world is composed of time and space. Time is the most mysterious and powerful. The so-called different space-time is like the past and the future. The past and the future both exist. However, they're not in the same space-time as us. If I'm not wrong, this stone tablet is in our future. Therefore, we see this stone tablet in front of us, but it's actually in the future. Unless we can travel through space-time to the same space-time as the stone tablet, otherwise, we won't be able to touch the stone tablet no matter what. The saint ruler's explanation was not very clear. It was even a little vague. However, everyone present was an expert, so they understood very quickly. In layman's terms, their space-time was today, but the stone tablet space-time was tomorrow. Although it was only a day's difference, could they travel from today to tomorrow? Of course, with the passage of time, today would become yesterday and step into tomorrow. However, one should not forget that the stone tablet's time was also constantly passing. When they entered tomorrow's space-time, the stone tablet was already the day after tomorrow. There was an eternal gap between the two. Is this the rules of time? In the crowd, a saint ruler expert murmured. Everyone was shocked, and their faces were filled with shock and greed. In this world, there were all kinds of rules and rules. For example, the rules of lightning, the rules of 5 elements, the rules of space, and so on. However, in terms of mysteriousness, the rules of time were the most prominent. The rules of time were above the rules of space. Once one mastered the rules of space, they could use the power of space. Just like Muronyu and the little lowly. If one mastered the rules of time, they could use the power of time. Speeding up or slowing down time with a wave of the hand was the most basic ability. For example, the ability to accelerate time in Hichu Luoshu was extremely rare in the saint's world. This was because the prerequisite for refining a saint weapon with such an ability was to be proficient in the rules of time. The difference between the two was like the difference between a saint and a god. However, there were as many saints as there were sand in the saint's world, but there were only a few who could comprehend the rules of time. As for the rules of space, there were none. Therefore, saint weapons with the ability to accelerate time were extremely rare. This stone tablet's cultivation technique is the rules of time. This is countless times more powerful than the soul sanctification cultivation technique. Looking at the huge, illusory stone tablet, many people were already tempted. Soul attacks were powerful, but they were nothing in the rules of time. It was just like how they were facing the stone tablet now. If they were not in the same space-time, no matter how powerful their soul attacks were, could they attack the stone tablet? Thinking of this, more and more people began to get excited. Many people's gazes fell on Muronyu. Their intuition told them that the stone tablet's abnormality must have a direct relationship with Muronyu. As a result, even more people walked towards Muronyu. All of them were brimming with killing intent. Hey, why is this boy's body exuding a different holy light than the stone tablet? And it's also illusory. A profound sage suddenly exclaimed. Could it be that he has already comprehended the rules of time? Damn it. The complexion of an ancient sage suddenly changed. He stretched out his hand and grabbed Murongyu, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground. The little lowly standing beside Murong, you first looked at the incomparably huge holy light, then at Murongyu. When she saw the ancient sage make his move, her figure flashed, and she directly left Murongyu's side. Unexpectedly, she did not protect Murongyu. Shwa, how fast was an ancient sage? In less than a tenth of an instant, his big hand had already grabbed Murongyu's illusory figure. Yes, it was just an illusory figure, just like the huge stone tablet. When the ancient sage's big hand grabbed down, Murongyu's illusory figure only rippled. However, Murongyu's complexion did not even change. Not in the same space-time. The ancient sage's complexion suddenly changed, and he once again stretched out his big hand to grab Murongyu. However, the big hand of Saint King Expert was even faster, grabbing over before the ancient sage could. However, the result was the same. He really controls the rules of time. The complexions of the others changed, and they all grabbed at Murongyu. However, the result did not change. Then, they lost their temper. Now that Murongyu was not in the same space-time as them, he was already in an invincible position. Not to mention a Saint King, even an Ancestor Sage would not be able to do anything to Murongyu. Someone said somewhat discouraged, so scary. If he controls the rules of time, won't he be invincible? He was shocked by Murongyu. The Saint King who spoke before said indifferently, not necessarily. As long as one is strong enough, space-time can be annihilated. Space-time, the rules of time, and so on were all explained by him. However, he still did not make a move against Murongyu. A profound sage curiously asked, "Can Senior destroy the space-time here?" The Saint King just smiled faintly and took a deep look at Murongyu. Then, he went to a nearby mountain and sat down cross-legged, entering a state of cultivation. The others looked at each other and kept attacking, but they could not do anything to Murongyu. Profound sages and ancient sages could destroy the void. However, they could not destroy the space. As for the Saint Kings, some people were ready to make a move, but for some reason, they did not make a move. Perhaps they all knew that even if they destroyed this space, they would only force Murongyu out. Then, Murongyu would enter another space-time, and no one would be able to do anything to him. Array character formula. The rules of time. Murongyu didn't know about any of this. At this moment, his whole mind was focused on the inside of the stone tablet, comprehending the array character formula of the 9 words mantra. Just as the Saint King had guessed, the array character formula corresponded to the rules of time. Chapter 1335. Time flowed back to the moment when Murongyu's divine thought entered the stone tablet. Just like the previous few words, when Murongyu came into contact with the Lie character formula, he could directly comprehend the Lie character formula without any suspense. Everything seemed to flow naturally. However, although there were only a few words in the Lie character formula, it was not that easy to completely comprehend it. Even if it was only at the entry level, it would not be done immediately. Therefore, Murongyu needed to comprehend it. However, because he had already cultivated 5 words, it was much easier for him to comprehend the Lie character formula. What Murongyu did not know was that so many changes were happening outside while he was comprehending the Lie character formula. He only felt that his mind was completely connected with the stone tablet, and an inexplicable power from the stone tablet fell on him through the void. That was the power of time. The power of time allowed Murongyu and the stone tablet to stay in the same space-time. Otherwise, if the two of them were in different space-time, Murongyu could not continue to comprehend the Lie character formula. During this process, countless people attacked the stone tablet and Murongyu. However, they could not do anything to Murongyu. Murongyu still did not notice any of this. That was because he did not have the extra energy to observe everything outside. That was because the rule of time was too magical. When Muronyu found out that the Lie character formula was the rule of time, he was completely fascinated. Is this the power of time? After a long time, when Muronyu finally comprehended the Lie character formula, he finally woke up. Immediately, he felt the power of time being exerted on him. Unlike the others who saw him as an illusion, Muronyu's vision of the others was normal. Moreover, as long as he was willing, he could enter their space-time at any time. Different space-time? Muronyu muttered to himself and already knew what had happened. He was immediately shocked. Amidst the shock, a surprised smile appeared on his face. Rumble. However, before he could continue to comprehend the use of the power of time, the stone tablet that had become illusory suddenly exploded with a loud bang and disappeared into thin air. At the same time as the stone tablet exploded, words that were almost invisible tore through the void space and gushed into Muronyu's mind. Muronyu did not find this strange, because the 9 syllables were all like this. Once someone comprehended it, no one else could continue to receive it. Unless the person who comprehended the 9 symbolic words died, the 9 symbolic words would not continue to appear in other places. In other words, there could only be one person who could cultivate the 9 words mantra. However, the rest of the people were completely stunned by this. Shocked, they all glared fiercely at Muronyu. Their faces were filled with anger and greed. A profound sage who had been paying attention to Muronyu suddenly roared. He seems to have returned to our space-time. Let's do it. Then a claw tore through the air and grabbed at Muronyu. Muronyu was startled, but not because the other party had suddenly attacked. It was because when the stone tablet shattered, the power of time that had shrouded him also disappeared. Oof. At the same time that profound sage made his move, more people nearby reacted and stretched out their hands to grab Muronyu. Among them, there was no lack of sage monarch powerhouses. So many people are attacking. Muronyu's heart skipped a beat, and he was about to retreat and leave this place. But soon, he seemed to have thought of something and stood in place, motionless. His mind had already sunk into the Ray character formula, and he began to operate the law of time with all his might. The power of time. Muronyu crazily operated the array character formula. Finally, a weak force rushed out of his body like a small snake. Originally, Muronyu's intention was to condense the power of time and cover his whole body. Then, he would enter a different space-time. This way, even if the attacks of those people were 100 times stronger, they would not be able to do anything to him. However, what was the use of that small snake-like power of time? Not to mention covering his whole body, it could not even cover one of his hands. At this moment, Muronyu wanted to cry, but had no tears. Moreover, the attacks of those powerhouses had already torn through the void and were fiercely grabbing at him. Time and space reversal. Muronyu roared in his heart, and that small snake-like power of time suddenly shattered in front of him, turning into a mist that filled the sky. Under his control, it turned into a thin film that blocked in front of him. Chi-chi. The moment the thin film appeared, the frenzied experts began to bombard it with attacks. Layers of ripples appeared on the film, and the attacks of those powerhouses, including the Sage Monarch powerhouses, were blocked. However, not even the slightest bit of aura hit Muronyu's body. It was completely blocked by the thin film. This is the power of time. Muronyu was overjoyed when he saw the thin film between the two of them. On the other hand, those people opposite Muronyu were shocked. Their feelings were completely different from Muronyu's. Just now, when their power hit the thin film, they felt as if their power was being pulled away by an invisible hand and quickly dissipated. It was inexplicably removed. The film that looked like it could be pierced with a poke actually blocked their attacks. However, they also understood that it was not the film that blocked their attacks. That layer of power of time was in a different space-time from them. Their power must have been guided to another space-time by that film. However, the layers of ripples on the film told them that the power of time was not invincible and could also be broken. Thus, after being stunned for a moment, they once again launched their attacks at him. Rumble as the violent power blasted over. The film vibrated more and more violently. In the end, it even trembled violently. Murong Yu's expression changed slightly as he madly operated the Lie character formula in his heart. Waves of power of time burst out from his body and poured into the film. Therefore, although the film looked like it could be broken at any time, it stubbornly held on. Moreover, as Murong Yu became more proficient in the control of the Lie character formula, he could control more and more power of time. In fact, the film was gradually getting thicker and bigger. Oh no, this kid's power of time is getting stronger. If this goes on, we won't be able to do anything to him, an ancient sage said in a gloomy voice. Before his power of time grows stronger, seal off this area of the void. I want to see how he can leave this place, another ancient sage said in a low voice. Then, they made their move. Murong Yu's expression changed slightly. In a flash, he appeared beside little Loli. Then, before little Loli could react, he grabbed her and threw her into the Hichu Luoshu world. Ha! I'm not playing with you anymore. Murong Yu waved his hand, and a large amount of power of time covered the space behind him. It reversed the space-time and blocked the attacks of countless experts. Then, he reached out with his other hand and tore a huge crack in the void. At the same time, his body swayed, and he crashed into the crack and disappeared. When the power of time that Murong Yu spread out dissipated, the spatial crack that he tore also disappeared. Then, everyone on the island looked at each other, not knowing what to do. This was because they did not know where Murong Yu had escaped to. The power of time could tear the space apart. Thinking that Murong Yu, an undead sage, actually had such a heaven-defying ability, the people on the island could not help but feel their scalps go numb. He was merely an undying saint, yet he was able to escape unscathed under the attack of several saint kings. What was going on? This was just the undead realm. What if he broke through to the undead realm, or even the profound sage realm? How terrifying would his strength be? At that time, if he wanted to seek revenge, how many of those who had just attacked could stop him? Thinking of this problem, everyone fell silent. But they would not regret it. That was the law of time. If they could control the power of time, Murong Yu relied on the law of time to resist the attacks of saint kings in the undead realm and came out unscathed. Then, wouldn't a profound sage be able to ignore existences like the primal chaos ancestor sage? Everyone, I, Murong Yu, am not so easy to kill. Anyone who wanted to kill me was killed by me in the end. I will remember you. Suddenly, Murong Yu's voice came from afar. Everyone's expression suddenly changed, and they immediately spread out their powerful divine senses. But they did not find anything. Even the Saint Kings frowned slightly. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. After Murong Yu spoke, several figures soared into the sky and flew off into the distance. It was unknown whether they were scared away by Murong Yu's words, or because the stone tablet had been broken. Anyway, it did not take long for there to be no one left on the island. As they left, the news that Murong Yu had comprehended the law of time spread out. It was good to be famous, but if you did not have enough strength, you would not be famous unless you had a strong background. Otherwise, the more famous you were, the faster you would die. Just like Murong Yu, who had been chased by Heaven Fire City, Heaven Slaughter Sect, and Broken Star Sect. But that only aroused everyone's curiosity. However, when the news that he had comprehended the law of time spread out, almost the entire Holy Kingdom of Nine Een was shaken. Especially when they knew that Murong Yu had relied on the law of time to fight against Saint Kings as an undead realm expert. Even the Saint ancestors were alarmed. Chapter 1336. In Hichu Luoshu, Murong Yu sat cross-legged on the ground with a pale face, recovering his consumed strength. This was the first time he used the power of time and void travel. The power of time was still okay. Murong Yu was not very familiar with the Lie character formula, so he could not use much of the power of time. However, Traversing through the void had nearly exhausted him to death. Originally, with Murong Yu's strength at the first level of the undead realm, it was absolutely impossible for him to tear the void. Not to mention tearing the void, even if he attacked with all his strength, he could not even create ripples in the void. But because of the uniqueness of the Lie character formula, he could easily tear the void. But the price was almost 50% of his strength. Then, he walked in the void at a speed faster than teleportation. But the price was also huge. Every moment consumed 10% of Murong Yu's strength. Even if the Tree of Life was devouring a large amount of chaotic power at every moment, it could not offset the consumed power at all. He was always in a situation where he could not make ends meet. Therefore, Murong Yu did not travel far. After forcibly traveling a distance, he came out of the void on a nearby island. However, the reason why those people hadn't discovered him was because Murong Yu had entered the world of He Tu and Luo Shu after coming out of the void. The speed of void travel is very fast and very convenient. But the biggest disadvantage is that it consumes too much power. With my current strength, I can't travel long distances. But as the realm continues to improve, there will be a day when the consumption and absorption of power can be balanced. Even in the end, void travel does not consume much power at all. After a period of recovery, Murong Yu, who was pale because of the excessive consumption of power, returned to normal. However, although I can't travel through the void now, but I can use void travel to fool people and then enter Hichu Luo Shu. The world can no longer discover the secret of Hichu Luo Shu. Although void travel was not perfect, Murong Yu is already very satisfied. These need time to improve their power. However, the power of time needs to be quickly cultivated and strengthened. Murong Yu frowned slightly and began to cultivate the formation word formula. Like other powers, there was a large amount of time power in the world. What Murong Yu needed to do was to communicate with this time power and use it directly. However, if he wanted to use the power of time directly, he had to convert his own power into the power of time first. Just like the laws of space, Murong Yu could now convert all the power in his body into the power of space at any time. That way, his spatial energy would be limitless, and he wouldn't even need to use the spatial energy of heaven and earth. Of course, if it was a large-scale void confinement, the use of spatial storm and other skills would require the use of the spatial energy of heaven and earth. The power of time earlier was too little. Otherwise, I definitely wouldn't have let those people off. Murong Yu's eyes flashed with a cold, killing intent. Ever since he had ascended to the saint's world, he had always been hunted down, which had already made him very frustrated. Moreover, his personality was that he would only hunt down people. No one else would hunt him down. Just like he had said, he had killed all those who wanted to kill him. However, there were just too many experts on the island. The power of time Murong Yu had forcefully used back then was too weak. It couldn't even wrap around his arm, so it was impossible to block them. In reality, when Murong Yu tore through space and passed through it, the power of time in his body had been completely exhausted. The power of time is too little. At the very least, I need to condense enough to wrap around my entire body. That way, I can pass through space as I wish, and killing people will be as easy as slaughtering chickens. Murong Yu's eyes shone brightly. Very soon, he calmed his mind and worked hard on cultivating. As Murong Yu cultivated, the entire holy kingdom of Nine Een was in an uproar. There was no other reason other than Murong Yu's laws of time. From the quasi-saint to the ancestral saints, perhaps even the ancestral saints of primal chaos were tempted. For a moment, countless saints of the holy kingdom of Nine Een were on the move. They all searched for Murong Yu's traces. In fact, even more people had entered the desert of death in search of Murong Yu. Previously, when Murong Yu's soul had become a saint, it had only alarmed a single province in the holy kingdom of Nine Een. However, the laws of time had shaken the entire holy kingdom of Nine Een. How many provinces were there in the holy kingdom of Nine Een? In fact, the news was even spreading outside the holy kingdom of Nine Een. This was because the laws of time were just too tempting to everyone. However, Muron Yu and the others were completely unaware of this. Time passed. Perhaps only a few months had passed, or perhaps a few epochs had passed. Muron Yu, who had been cultivating all this time, had returned to the state he was in when he was comprehending the array character formula on the island. His entire body was enveloped by the power of time. Although everyone was in the Hichu Luo Shu, Muron Yu, Yu Mengqing, and the others were clearly not in the same space-time. Phew! After cultivating for an entire year, I've finally converted 10% of my strength into the power of time. At this stage, it should be enough. However, the power of time shouldn't only be used to reverse space-time, right? What if I use it against enemies? Muron Yu stopped cultivating and slowly stood up from the ground. He stared blankly at a giant tree not far in front of him. What would happen if a living person and an object were placed in a different space-time? Muron Yu suddenly had this thought. After this thought appeared, it immediately got out of hand. With a thought, an enormous power of time shot out from his body. It tore through the void and directly covered half of the giant tree. Space-time reversal. Muron Yu shouted in his heart. He sped up the flow of time and reversed space-time. Gotcha! Just as Muron Yu was reversing space-time, the giant tree collapsed with a loud bang. The lower half was fine and had no effect. However, the half covered by the power of time was completely shattered. There's actually such an ability? Muron Yu was stunned at first, then ecstasy overcame him. However, in order to test if the power of time was really so powerful, Muron Yu tried several times in succession. Giant trees, boulders, and even peaks had the same result. Half of the reversed space-time shattered. However, if the whole thing was reversed, this would not happen. If the space-time was reversed, then the whole thing would be in two different space-time. Then it would be torn apart by an inexplicable force. Muron Yu pondered. He was quite satisfied with this result, but he could not figure out what kind of force could destroy those objects that had been reversed in space-time. Could it be the power of time? Husband, what kind of power is this? Seeing that Muron Yu just pointed his finger and did not even feel the fluctuation of power, those peaks and the like shattered, Yu Mengqing and the others were quite puzzled. And Situ Xian asked in surprise. The power of time. Muron Yu explained. Everyone nodded in realization, but they were still puzzled in their hearts. Muron Yu did not explain. The power of time was too mysterious, and he did not fully understand it. If he explained, it would only make things more confusing. These can only be regarded as dead objects. I wonder what will happen if it is used on a saint or a beast. Muron Yu's heart was restless, and he was about to leave Hichu Luo Chu to try it out outside. As for why he did not want Yu Mengqing and the others to be his test subjects, unless Muron Yu was out of his mind. Otherwise, he would not try it on them. It would be fine if nothing happened, but if anything happened, Muron Yu would regret it for the rest of his life. With a thought, Muron Yu had already appeared outside the Desert of Death. Although he did not want to use Hichu Luo Shu too much, it would be in front of others. Hichu Luo Shu's teleportation function was so powerful that he would be stupid not to use it. After seeing the danger of the Desert of Death, Muron Yu absolutely did not want to experience it again. In the future, if it was not necessary, he would certainly not enter the Desert of Death again. Devil's Wings. Muron Yu stepped out of the He-Tu and the Book of the Luo. His divine sense instantly covered the surrounding area. After confirming that there weren't any powerful vicious beasts, he used his demon wings. The angel's wings only had a pair of wings, as white as an angel's. After the army formula evolved, the devil's wings had an extra pair of wings, making it 2 pairs of wings. And it was very different from the angel's wings. The original white and flawless wings had become a rich black, like chaos. Swish, after observing the devil's wings for a while, Muron Yu's thoughts moved, and he flapped the wings. The next moment, a stream of light flashed through the void, and then Muron Yu disappeared into the distant horizon. So fast. I'm afraid it's 100 times faster than the angel's wings. Feeling the extreme speed brought by the devil's wings, Muron Yu is still a little shocked. Even an ancient sage can't compare to this speed. Of course, there was still a big gap between him and a sage ruler. However, Muronyu was confident that even a sage ruler wouldn't be able to catch up to him. The devil's wings, void travel, and the power of time. Even if he did not use Hichu Luoshu, Muronyu was confident that he could escape from a sage ruler's attack. Of course, this was the ideal situation. If it was really so, then it would have to be investigated. In the endless mountain range, an undead stage beast stood on a peak, roaring at the sky, and the aura on its body was surging and terrifying. It spread far and wide, causing all the ferocious beasts and demonic beasts in the area to tremble. However, all of a sudden, the body of the ferocious beast exploded without any warning. But the strange thing was that the back of its body did not have any abnormalities. It even maintained its original posture without moving. Swish! A figure appeared behind the beast, and his face was full of smiles. The power of time is indeed not bad, much stronger than the power of space. This person was Muronyu. Chapter 1337. White Sun City. In a restaurant in the center of the city, Muronyu and the others were eating heartily. After leaving the Desert of Death, Muronyu immediately looked for the power of time that the great beasts had broken their promises. After experimenting, he found that he could kill profound sage great beasts with just the power of time. After all, Muronyu was already capable of killing enemies 2 realms higher than him. With his cultivation, the power of time, and his soul power, Muronyu was confident that he could even kill a high-level expert easily. He didn't even fear an ancient sage. After all, even if he couldn't kill an ancient sage with his cultivation, his soul couldn't break through the seal of an ancient sage's power and shatter his opponent's soul. But if he used the power of time could keep Muronyu in a different space-time from his opponent. This way, he would be in an invincible position. If he used the power of time, he could even kill a low-level ancient sage. At the very least, he would have no problem protecting himself. The reason why he came back to White Sun City was to settle a few things here. The Leaf family, the City Lord's mansion, the Blood Rain Mountain, and even the Great Dragon Sect. The Leaf family, the Blood Rain Mountain, and the City Lord's mansion had almost caused Muronyu to lose his life. Muronyu had always remembered this deeply in his heart. He wasn't a magnanimous person. In fact, he was somewhat vile. Therefore, after becoming strong, he immediately came back to take revenge. Big Baddie, what are your plans after taking revenge? The little loli was the first person to support Murongyu's return to take revenge. This little fellow was getting more and more violent. If not for Muronyu stopping her, she would have already killed her way to the City Lord's mansion when she appeared in White Sun City. What plans? Muronyu was stunned. For a moment, he couldn't answer. Cultivate, become strong, establish a sect, and then kill Zhao Yun's enemies to take revenge for Zhao Yun. Then, continue to cultivate, and finally kill the ruler, become the ruler of the holy world, and finally become the supreme controller of primal chaos. This was Murongyu's plan, although he hadn't seen the so-called ruler. However, Muronyu knew that they would face each other one day. If a chaos celestial body wanted to become a primal chaos controller, the sovereigns would definitely be one of the most powerful enemies in the Saint's world. The sovereign wouldn't allow him to surpass him and look up to Muronyu. Thus, in order for Muronyu to become a primal chaos controller, he had to either kill a ruler or be killed. As for the primal chaos Shenzhen, Muronyu had already thought about it. He would destroy the giant dragon sect and build the Shenzhen sect there. This was because there was a Saint crystal vein beneath the great dragon sect. In fact, Shenzhen wasn't a much help to Muronyu. From the cultivation world to the immortal world, and then to the god realm, Shenzhen was practically a burden to Muronyu. There were very few places where Shenzhen could be used. However, it was Murongyu's painstaking effort, so he naturally wouldn't give it up. He wanted to build Shenzhen in the holy world and let Shenzhen's disciples ascend. As for whether or not they could enter the undying, imperishable realm after ascending, Muronyu didn't plan to care so much. Although Shenzhen was created by him, There was no need to protect it like a flower in a greenhouse. However, after ascending to the holy world for so long, Yu discovered that the holy world was even crueler than the God realm. This was especially true for his own cultivation. If he wanted to increase his cultivation in the undying realm, he would need to refine a top-grade saint artifact. What about the undying realm, profound sage realm, or even higher realms? If he continued to struggle alone, the speed of his cultivation would be extremely slow. After all, his strength was limited, and limited by his strength, he wouldn't be able to obtain high-grade saint artifacts, various natural treasures, and so on. I have to find a sect to join. Yu muttered to himself. Why did he have to join a sect and not a holy empire? If he joined a holy empire, he could only become a soldier of the holy empire or an official like the city lord. Whether it was a soldier or other positions, he would have the opportunity to be promoted. In the end, he might even become an important minister of the holy empire. But once a minister, he would be a minister for life. Even if he was below 1 and above thousands, he would still be a minister without any freedom. Even the people of the Holy Empire couldn't leave the Holy Empire as they wished. But joining a sect was different. Although there were various restrictions in a sect, but at the very least, there wouldn't be any restrictions on his freedom. He could go wherever he wanted, and there was no need to report to the sect. Do you know of any powerful sects? Yu pondered for a moment, then looked at the little lowly and asked. The little lowly's background was deep, and she knew a lot more than Yu. The little lowly's face suddenly showed a proud expression. She proudly raised her little head, then said with a smile, "You want to join a sect? With your aptitude, some small sects are completely unnecessary. Even if you join, it would just be a waste of time." After saying that, the little lowly pondered. Not long after, her eyes suddenly flashed with a trace of light. True Martial Temple. If I remember correctly, the True Martial Temple will soon recruit disciples from the entire human race. You can join the True Martial Temple. The more the little lowly spoke, the more excited she became. Yu and the others looked at the little lowly speechlessly. They couldn't understand why the little lowly was so excited, because their understanding of the holy world was too little. It could be said that they were in the dark and didn't know anything. You don't know about the True Martial Temple? Seeing Yu and the others looking at her blankly, the little lowly became more and more proud. After drinking a mouthful of tea, she continued to speak with spittle flying everywhere. Do you know about the Supremes? Yu nodded. I heard that the entire holy world can only have 10 Supremes? Only a few and not a lot. The little lowly nodded and looked at Yu with an admiring gaze. It was as if she was saying that Yu wasn't so ignorant and inexperienced. Understanding the little lowly's meaning, Yu's face couldn't help but darken. He immediately glared fiercely at the little lowly. The little lowly smiled proudly and continued. Currently, the human race only has 2 Supremes. Do you know who those 2 Supremes are? One of them is the True Martial Supreme. True Martial Supreme? What's his relationship with the True Martial Temple? Yu's pupils suddenly shrank, and he hurriedly asked. Yu Mengqing and the others also stared at the little lowly without blinking. The True Martial Temple was founded by the True Martial Supreme. The True Martial Supreme is the founder of the True Martial Temple. Although the current Temple Master of the True Martial Temple isn't the True Martial Supreme, and the True Martial Supreme rarely appears. However, as one of the founders of the True Martial Temple, he will occasionally preach in the temple. Some outstanding disciples can even receive the personal guidance of the True Martial Supreme. It's precisely because of this that the True Martial Temple is one of the few great cultivation holy lands of the human race. Its foundation is so deep that it is on par with the other Supremes' holy lands to become the 2 most powerful holy lands of the human race. Almost every human sage wants to join these holy lands. Yu narrowed his eyes slightly. He didn't take the fact that the True Martial Supreme would guide the disciples' cultivation seriously. As the Supremes, how could they have the time to guide these sages? And even if they really did have guidance, how often would it appear? And they just happened to be chosen? Moreover, in terms of cultivation, Moronyu never needed a master. This was because Hichu was a competent master. He had followed many chaotic celestial bodies, and the strength of each of those chaotic celestial bodies wasn't bad. Moronyu guessed that Zhao Yun was probably at the level of a primal chaos ancestor. He might even be at the Supreme's level. In addition to the other chaotic celestial bodies, Hichu's canon was definitely richer than some primal chaos ancestor. Moronyu was interested in the various resources of the true martial temple. If he could become a disciple of the true martial temple, then his chances of obtaining various high-grade sage artifacts and various natural treasures would greatly increase. Moreover, those who had designs on him would be much more restrained. Although Moronyu wasn't afraid of those people, he was afraid of trouble. However, it wouldn't be that easy to become a disciple of the true martial temple, right? Of course. The little lowly glanced at Moronyu with a smile. Then she continued, the most basic requirement for true martial temple to recruit disciples is to reach the undead realm. Uffed, when he spat out a mouthful of tea. He had the highest cultivation level among those present, but he was only at the peak of the undead realm. Although Moronyu was strong, his cultivation level was clearly at the first level of the undead realm. It seemed that the little lowly's words were all for nothing. Moronyu unhappily glared at the little lowly. He couldn't be bothered to continue listening to her nonsense. However, although you're at the undead realm, it's not impossible to become a disciple of the true martial temple. The little lowly smiled proudly. Moronyu looked at the little lowly speechlessly. Can you not take a breath after each sentence? Can't you say it all at once? The little lowly stuck out her tongue and made a face at Moronyu before continuing. The undead realm is the official disciple. Apart from that, there's also a servant disciple. As long as you reach the undead realm, you can join. After becoming a servant disciple, as long as you reach the undead realm, you can officially become an outer disciple of the true martial temple. Of course, there are other ways to become an official disciple. When you become a servant disciple, you'll know. At this point, the little lowly smiled mysteriously. She looked at Moronyu and asked, there's another way for you to immediately become an outer disciple of the true martial temple, or even an inner disciple. At this point, the little lowly saw Moronyu's face darken, so she no longer kept him in suspense. As long as you reveal that you're a soul sanctified expert or that you control the law of time, I believe you'll be specially recruited into the true martial temple. Moronyu rolled his eyes. If it was really like this, then he could only become a lab rat of the true martial temple. He might even be controlled. But right now, he could only become a servant disciple of the true martial temple. Anyway, with his speed, it wouldn't take long for him to reach the undead realm. And weren't there other ways to become an outer disciple? Chapter 1338. In White Sun City, 2 guards stopped Moronyu and the rest at the gate of the City Lord's mansion. Who are you? Unrelated people are not allowed to get close to the City Lord's mansion. If you dare to take half a step forward, you will be locked up in the heavenly prison. The 2 guards shouted. However, their eyes kept darting back and forth between Yu Mengqing and the rest of the girls, as if they were mesmerized. It couldn't be helped. Yu Mengqing and the rest were all beautiful women. Wherever they went, they would attract the attention of others. This was unavoidable, but they were already used to it. Moronyu didn't mind this. If Moronyu cared about these things, then how many people would he have to kill? Whenever he encountered a man, he would kill him. Taking a step forward, Moronyu stopped in front of the 2 guards and looked at them with a smile. Don't you recognize me? Wasn't I very famous back then? I was called something like the top-grade servant. The 2 guards looked at Moronyu with confusion. However, their faces changed quickly. You are Moronyu? Aren't you being hunted down? Moronyu's incident in White Sun City had long been known by everyone. Later on, Moronyu was being hunted down by various people. Now, the entire 9 Holy Kingdom was shaken. Although White Sun City was small, the news didn't fall behind. On the contrary, They were talking about something even more ferocious. After all, Murong came from White Sun City. Whoosh! After recognizing Murong, the two guards retreated in a flash. They were actually scared away. After a while, a sharp scream came from the city lord's mansion. Murong is back. Murong is back. Everyone knew about the grudge between Murong and the city lord mansion. Now that Murong was here, even an idiot knew what he was going to do. What? Murong is back. Hearing the miserable cries of the two guards, the other people in the city lord's mansion could not help but be shocked. One by one, they rushed out. Even Fong Tianhe and Fong Ziwen, who were discussing in the main hall, had a slight change in expression. Fong Ziwen was a bit better. After all, she didn't do anything wrong to Murong. However, Fong Tianhe betrayed Murong because of Li Di's words. Originally, the price he paid for betraying Murong was to curry favor with the Heavenly Slaughter sect. However, after Li Di had been killed, the Heaven Fiend sect had wantonly hunted down Murong. At that time, he had already regretted it. Offending a soul saint was an absolute disaster. However, it had already happened. Even if he regretted it, it was useless. Therefore, he could only pray in his heart that Murong would be hunted down by those experts. However, with the news of Murong constantly being hunted down, Fong Tianhe became more and more depressed. Recently, it was rumored that Murong had mastered the time law. The time law was something even more terrifying than a soul saint. Now, it was controlled by Murong alone. After Fong Tianhe found out, he began to feel uneasy. He was afraid that Murong would come to kill him. However, Murong's footprints were getting farther and farther away from White Sun City. Fong Tianhe's heart began to slowly relax. However, today he suddenly heard that Murong had come to kill him. This guy's face turned pale. Father, seeing Fong Tianhe's expression, Fong Ziwen couldn't help but feel helpless. Father, don't think too much. How long has it been? Even if Murong has reached the undead realm, he's still not your match. Moreover, you're not the only expert in the City Lord's mansion. Murong might not have come to seek revenge this time. He might have come for something else. Something else? Fong Tianhe's eyes flashed. He immediately guessed. Could it be that he wants to rebuild? He wants to use us to join the 9 in Holy Kingdom? That must be it. Right now, the entire 9 in Holy Kingdom is hunting him down. With his strength, he won't be able to resist. Joining the 9 in Holy Kingdom is the only way. Speaking of this, Fong Tianhe's face suddenly revealed a smile. His original look of panic had completely disappeared. He regained the demeanor of a city lord who controlled a city. Yes, that must be good. Hee. Does a soul saint have something to ask of me? Fong Tianhe chuckled. His eyes flickered. No one knew what he was thinking. Seeing Fong Tianhe's change, Fong Ziwen's expression didn't change. However, she was worried in her heart. With her understanding of Murong, she knew that Murong didn't come to join them this time. It was very likely that he came for revenge. Murong dared to come for revenge, which meant that he had enough strength. They were in danger. Let's go and see this old friend. Fong Tianhe laughed and left the hall first. Fong Ziwen's lips moved slightly. She wanted to say something, but in the end, she didn't say anything. She just followed Fong Tianhe and left quickly. At this moment, Murong and his group walked into the city lord's mansion as if they were taking a stroll. They walked toward the hall. Beside them were the guards and servants of the city lord's mansion. Each of them held their weapons tightly and looked at Murong with vigilance. They were extremely nervous. However, they didn't dare to make a move. They just followed Murong's movements. At the same time, many people outside the city lord's mansion had heard the news and came over. Some people even flew into the sky and looked at the city lord's mansion from the void. They all wanted to see what Murong was going to do. At this moment, a burst of laughter came from the depths of the city lord's mansion. In the next moment, Fong Tianhe's figure appeared not far in front of Murong. Murong, did you come back this time to join the 9 in Holy Kingdom? Although you're a soul saint and even control the law of time, however, it's not that easy to join the 9 in Holy Kingdom. I can help you, but you can only start from the bottom. Do you understand? As soon as Fong Tianhe appeared, he said something that shocked everyone. In an instant, everyone except the city lord's mansion was shocked. They all looked at Murongyu with suspicion. Is Murongyu really going to join the Nine in Holy Kingdom? Yes, he's being chased all over the world. Only by joining the Nine in Holy Kingdom will he not be chased. Everyone discussed. They all took Fong Tianhe's words seriously. Murongyu was also stunned. When did he say that he wanted to join the Nine in Holy Kingdom? Could it be that Fong Tianhe's brain was fried? What? Why are you still in a daze? Come in. Seeing Murongyu's stunned expression, Fong Tianhe's face couldn't help but darken. He actually scolded him. It was as if Murongyu had really become his subordinate. Husband, is this guy's brain fried? Kurlan couldn't help but ask. Murongyu, Yu Mengqing, and the others nodded. They looked at Fong Tianhe with sympathy. Fong Tianhe's heart thumped. Could it be that I misunderstood? Murongyu didn't come to join the Nine in Holy Kingdom, but to seek revenge? If that's the case, Fong Tianhe's face instantly darkened. At that moment, Murongyu spoke up. That's enough. City Lord Fong, don't play the fool here. My purpose for coming here today is very simple. It's to settle the score from back then. Now, I'll give you a choice. If you can give me a satisfactory compensation, I'll let you go. Otherwise, when he said this, Murongyu's eyes flashed with a cold light. The surrounding people suddenly felt a chill in their hearts. The temperature of the world seemed to have plummeted. How dare you? Murongyu, do you know where this is? I'm the ruler of the Nine in Holy Kingdom. Are you threatening me now? Do you know that you're going against the Nine in Holy Kingdom? Fong Tianhe said sternly in his heart. There was a sense of strength in appearance, but weakness in heart. Although White Sun City isn't big, there must be many people coveting your position. If I kill you today, do you think those people will be very happy? Or should I say, the Nine in Holy Kingdom will attack me because of you, a mere undead saint? Murongyu sneered. Fong Tianhe's face became more and more unsightly. How dare you? Even if you're a soul saint, you can't hide the fact that you're in the first stage of the undead realm. How dare you say such words? How preposterous! Fong Tianhe shouted. At the same time, he stretched out his hand and grabbed Murongyu. He's making a move. He's making a move. I heard that the city lord is a powerhouse at the peak of the undead realm, and Murongyu is only in the first stage of the undead realm. I wonder which one of them is stronger. I heard that Murongyu can even kill a profound saint. This time, he must have full confidence in taking revenge. I think City Lord Fong is in for a tragedy. That's not necessarily true. As a city lord, he still has some means. What are you arguing about? Won't you know if you keep watching? Peak of the undead realm. Murongyu sneered. His figure flickered, and he took a step forward. At the same time, he also punched out. However, it was different from Fong Tianhe's fist, which carried a terrifying aura that could destroy the world. Murongyu's punch was understated. It didn't even spread out any energy fluctuations. It was soft and powerless. Die! Fong Tianhe shouted and punched Murongyu's fist. But soon his face changed greatly. With a bang, Fong Tianhe's fist directly exploded. And Murongyu's fist didn't stop at all, and it went straight ahead. Fong Tianhe's face was pale, and his eyes were full of horror. With a thought, he instantly retreated. He avoided Murongyu's attack. City Lord Fong, don't panic. I don't want to kill you for the time being. Murongyu withdrew his fist and smiled. Enough. Murongyu, have you had enough? At this moment, a tender voice was heard. Fong Ziwen's figure appeared beside Fong Tianhe. She first checked Fong Tianhe, and when she saw that he wasn't fatally injured, she breathed a sigh of relief. Then, she looked at Murongyu with anger on her pretty face. Chapter 1339. Murongyu, you don't care about our past kindness. You're so ungrateful that you hurt my father? Fong Ziwen's pretty face was filled with anger. Killing intent surged from the bottom of her heart as she cursed at Murongyu. Murongyu's brows slightly furrowed, and his expression darkened. He stopped Kurlan, who was about to retort, and slowly said, Past kindness? Miss Fong, You're really putting a big hat on my head. Let me think about it. Is the past kindness you're talking about when you took me in and made me your servant? You took me in. That was a huge favor back then. But other than that, what else is there? Is there only a few resources that you can't take out? As he spoke, Morong Yu's face gradually turned cold. Fong Ziwen had the nerve to take out these resources? Even if Fong Ziwen hadn't taken him in, he wouldn't have starved to death. On the contrary, if Fong Ziwen hadn't taken him in, the following events wouldn't have happened. Moreover, Fong Ziwen only took him in because she wanted to use him. What kind of good intentions could she have? Fong Ziwen's face turned red, and she looked at Morong Yu with anger. She wanted to say something, but she knew that Morong Yu was telling the truth. However, Fong Ziwen brought up this matter only to ease the current situation. Looking at Fong Ziwen's red and white face, Morong Yu sneered. When Fong Tianhe betrayed me, did he think this day would come? If it weren't for my good fortune, I'm afraid I would have been killed by your father that day. Aren't you still alive? Fong Ziwen angrily looked at Morong Yu. Morong Yu narrowed his eyes. So you're saying that if I died, your honorable father would have killed me? I'm not dead yet, so it doesn't count? Is this how your Fong family conducts themselves? Fong Ziwen opened her mouth, but in the end, she didn't say anything. However, Morong Yu, am not someone who bites the hand that feeds me. If it weren't for the old kindness, your father, the honorable city lord, would have already been killed by me. However, just because I didn't kill him just now doesn't mean that I won't kill him in the future. That was my way of repaying the kindness of the past. Now it's up to you. If you don't satisfy me, then I'll have no choice but to kill you. You? Fong Ziwen was furious. She gritted her teeth and looked at Morong Yu. A surge of hatred rose to the heavens. She hated Morong Yu and her father. If Fong Tianhe had not betrayed Morong Yu in the heat of the moment, how could he have ended up like this? What do you want? Fong Tianhe took a few steps forward and looked coldly at Morong Yu. However, his cold expression could not hide the panic in his heart. City Lord Fong, do you want me to look down on your intelligence? Enough nonsense. If you continue to dawdle, don't blame me for making a move, Morong Yu said impatiently. He really didn't have time to waste here. In addition to the City Lord's mansion, he still had to deal with the Blood Rain Mountain and the Great Dragon Sect. The true martial temple was about to recruit disciples, and it was far from the Nine Holy Kingdom. If he was late, then it would be a tragedy. A high-grade sacred artifact. Fong Tianhe pondered for a moment and said with clenched teeth. Even so, he still had a pained expression on his face. Morong Yu sneered. I say, City Lord Fong, are you trying to send a beggar away? A high-grade sacred artifact. Forget it. I don't want to waste my time with you. The City Lord's mansion's treasury is all mine. As he spoke, Morong Yu was about to walk forward. Hiss! Everyone couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Morong Yu was really arrogant. The City Lord's mansion's treasury was all his? One had to know that the treasury didn't only contain Fong Tianhe's treasures. Most of them belonged to the Nine Holy Kingdom. If Morong Yu dared to touch the treasury, then he would be going against the Nine Holy Kingdom. Fong Tianhe's expression changed. Then he sneered. If you have the ability, you can move the entire treasury over. But you will be hunted down by the Nine Holy Kingdom in the future. Although the holy world is big, there is absolutely no place for you. Let's go. Morong Yu sneered. Without any hesitation, he strode in with Yu Mengqing and the others. Seeing this, Fong Tianhe actually moved 2 steps to the side and made way for Morong Yu. Seeing this scene, the guards of the City Lord's mansion felt extremely sullen. This was their City Lord? Facing Morong Yu, he didn't resist at all? It was too sullen. How could such a person be the City Lord? At the very least, he should fight to the death, right? A wave of resentment emitted from these people. They were all disappointed in the City Lord's mansion. Some people even put away their weapons. Since the City Lord didn't care about it, then why should they be wary of Morong Yu? What did the City Lord's mansion's treasury being moved have to do with them? Sensing the change in everyone's mentality, Fong Ziwen complained in her heart. She used to think that her father was wise and powerful, but it turned out that everything was just an act. In the face of a real matter, her honorable father was just a good-for-nothing. Wait, Morongyu, you better think twice. Fong Ziwen's figure flashed and blocked in front of Morongyu. Looking at Morongyu, her eyes revealed a hint of pleading. Get out of the way. Morongyu stopped in his tracks. He didn't have any ill feelings towards Fong Ziwen. This woman was much better than his good-for-nothing father. If she was born in another family, she might be able to make a career out of it. But following Fong Tianhe, she was just like this. Fong Ziwen shook her head with a stubborn expression. Aya, too irritating. Wait for me to chop her with my axe. The little lowly, who had been silent for a long time, finally couldn't bear it anymore. Her figure flickered, and she already rushed out. Morongyu was shocked. He used time reversal to imprison the little lowly. He could kill Fong Tianhe, but he really couldn't kill Fong Ziwen. I'm so angry. Time and space were reversed, and they were now in a different time and space. The little lowly's face changed from anger. Morongyu shook his head and pointed at Fong Ziwen, who was about to continue speaking. A wave of time power immediately reversed Fong Ziwen's time and space. Then Morongyu took back the time power that was attached to the little lowly's body. The little lowly, who was crying out in anger, returned to their time and space. Big scoundrel, I'm going to chop you. After returning to the same time and space, the little lowly bared her fangs and brandished her axe towards Morongyu. Do you believe that I won't imprison you in a different time and space for a long time? Morongyu looked at the little lowly with a smile. Shwa! The little lowly's huge axe stopped just above Morongyu's head. The huge axe emitted a cold aura that stimulated Morongyu's scalp. Forget it. I'm a great person who doesn't mind petty people. Let's go to the city lord's mansion's treasury first. The little lowly snorted and her figure flickered, disappearing from sight. As a result, Morongyu and the others entered the city lord's mansion's treasury as if they were entering a place with no one around. Seeing this scene, the muscles on Fong Tianhe's face constantly twitched. Originally, he thought that the treasury's restrictions would be able to stop Morongyu and the others. But those restrictions didn't have any effect. But even so, he wasn't very nervous, because the things that belonged to him were still on him. There weren't any special treasures in the treasury. Moreover, they all belonged to the Holy Empire of Nine. Once Morongyu took them away, the experts of the Holy Empire of Nine would make a move on him. Fong Tianhe couldn't wait for Morongyu to destroy the treasury of the city lord's mansion. That way, someone would make a move to kill him. It was a perfect way to kill someone with a borrowed knife. Looking at Fong Ziwen, who was trapped in a different time and space, Fong Tianhe's face became gloomy. Then, he anxiously looked outside the White Sun City. Why hasn't that old bastard Blood Rain ancestor come yet? If Morongyu leaves. Originally, Fong Tianhe and Fong Ziwen left the main hall at the same time. But Fong Ziwen appeared in front of Morongyu after a long time. At first, Fong Tianhe didn't know what Fong Ziwen was doing. But in the end, he received a sound transmission from Fong Ziwen. It turned out that Fong Ziwen had used that time to inform the experts of the Blood Rain Mountain. There were many undead stage and profound sage stage experts in the Blood Rain Mountain. The Blood Rain ancestor was a 9th stage profound sage. If they came, Morongyu would die without a doubt. The Blood Rain Mountain had a blade, and the Nine Holy Kingdom had another blade. Fong Tianhe borrowed 2 blades. He didn't believe that he couldn't kill Morongyu. Thinking of this, the corners of Fong Tianhe's mouth curled into a smile. But soon, he seemed to have realized something. He hurriedly retracted the smile on his face and pretended to be angry. What is this? Is this a treasury? There's nothing here. At this time, Morongyu and the others came out of the treasury and complained while walking. Hearing their complaints, the surrounding people couldn't help but stagger. They looted someone's treasury and said that there weren't many good things in it. What kind of people were they? They were all stunned by Morongyu and the others. Morongyu came in front of Fong Tianhe and said with a smile, City Lord Fong, don't tell me you don't want to give me your storage ring. The muscles on Fong Tianhe's face twitched again and again. After hesitating for a moment, he finally took the storage ring and threw it to Murong Yu. Murong Yu was too strong. He couldn't resist at all. Moreover, as long as Murong Yu was killed, wouldn't these treasures return to his hands? City Lord Fong, the person you are waiting for hasn't come yet? Let me guess, is it the Blood Rain Mountain? Will the Blood Rain ancestor come personally? After taking away Fong Tianhe's storage ring, Murong Yu suddenly said with a smile. Fong Tianhe jumped up in fright. He looked at Murong Yu with a shocked face and asked, "How did you know?" Murong Yu sneered. How could he not know? After the formation character formula broke through to the third stage, he could easily read the minds of the people around him. Fong Tianhe was too proud and didn't have any vigilance. Therefore, Murong Yu saw through his thoughts with a glance. Chapter 1340. Murong Yu didn't answer Fong Tianhe's words and just looked at him with a smile. Seeing this, Fong Tianhe felt a chill in his heart. However, when the other people in the city lord's mansion heard their conversation, their eyes lit up. It turned out that the city lord's mansion had already invited Blood Rain Ancestor to help. It was no wonder that he was so calm and indifferent, allowing Murong Yu to plunder the entire treasury without making a single move. As long as Blood Rain Ancestor killed Murong Yu, wouldn't everything in the treasury be back? Moreover, he could also get Murong Yu's treasures. Brilliant! It was truly brilliant. For a while, the people in the city lord's mansion looked at Fong Tianhe with admiring eyes. The people's hearts that had been lost just now had returned. However, Fong Tianhe had a resentful look on his face. He was very clear about what kind of talent he had. If it weren't for Fong Ziwen, he wouldn't have thought of notifying Blood Rain Ancestor. Moreover, what frightened him now was that since Murong Yu knew that Blood Rain Ancestor was coming, why was he still so calm? Could it be that he wanted to deal with Blood Rain Ancestor together? He was just a first-stage undead. Fong Tianhe's guess was right. The reason why Murong Yu didn't leave was that he wanted to kill Blood Rain Ancestor. In any case, he wanted to kill Blood Rain Ancestor. Anyway, whether it was in White Sun City or in Blood Rain Mountain, he had to kill the other party. Moreover, the other party had delivered himself to his door. Murong Yu didn't even bother to go to Blood Rain Mountain. Thus, he used his power to create a few chairs and sat down in an imposing manner. Yu Mengqing and the others also followed suit and sat down as if there was no one else around. It was as if they were at home. Seeing this scene, the faces of the surrounding people darkened. Wasn't Murong Yu too arrogant? Blood Rain Ancestor was a super powerhouse at the peak of the profound sage realm, yet they didn't put him in their eyes at all. Fong Tianhe stood not far away from Murong Yu with an ugly expression. He didn't know whether to leave or not and felt very embarrassed. However, the insulting behavior of Murong Yu and the others had deeply stimulated him, making the resentment in his heart grow stronger and stronger. Ha ha! Suddenly, a burst of loud laughter came from the direction of the Blood Rain Mountain. At the same time, waves of strong auras swept over like torrential waves, instantly enveloping the entire White Sun City. Countless sages in the White Sun City were shocked as they looked towards the source of the voice. He just happened to see dozens of streams of light emitting an incomparably powerful aura shooting over from the direction of the Blood Rain Mountain. After a few breaths, these people were already close to White Sun City. It's the experts of the Blood Rain Mountain. Is the leader the Blood Rain Ancestor? After seeing those people, countless people in the White Sun City cried out in surprise. Patriarch Blood Rain rarely showed himself, and even if he did, the Saints of White Sun City would not have the chance to see him. Therefore, not many people knew him. However, many people recognized the experts behind him. If they were not the numerous experts of the Blood Rain Mountain, then what were they? There are quite a lot of people here. Imperishable Realm and Profound Saint Realm. Seeing that Patriarch Blood Rain and the others had already rushed to the sky above the City Lord's mansion, Murong Yu slowly stood up with an inexplicable smile on his face. You are Murong Yu? Patriarch Blood Rain looked at Murong Yu condescendingly. At the same time, an incomparably huge divine sense poured down like a torrent, sweeping towards Muronyu. I hate people who look up to others the most. Muronyu faintly smiled. Then, without any warning, he threw a punch at Patriarch Bloodrain. How dare you? Seeing that Muronyu had made a move, a high-level imperishable realm expert next to Patriarch Bloodrain roared. He took a step forward and blocked in front of Patriarch Bloodrain. At the same time, he pointed his finger like a sword and slashed at Muronyu's fist. The experts of the Bloodrain Mountain looked at Muronyu as if they were looking at an idiot. They couldn't understand why Muronyu, who was merely at the Undying Realm, dared to attack Patriarch Bloodrain. In their hearts, Muronyu was just an ant that could be easily crushed. They even disapproved of Patriarch Bloodrain's personal arrival. Patriarch Bloodrain didn't need to personally take down Muronyu, who was at the Undying Realm. However, the disdain on their faces soon turned into shock. This was because the power of the high-level imperishable realm expert's sword was shattered as soon as it touched Muronyu's fist. In a flash, Muronyu's fist had already smashed into the high-level imperishable realm expert's hand. After a muffled sound, the high-level undead stage expert's hand was directly shattered. However, Muronyu's huge fist didn't seem to be hindered at all. It went straight in and almost instantly smashed into the high-level imperishable realm expert's body. A look of extreme shock appeared on the face of the high-level imperishable stage expert. With a thought, he was about to retreat. However, he was fast, but Muronyu was even faster. As soon as he thought about it, Muronyu almost attacked. The imperishable realm expert's body was about to be shattered by Muronyu's fist. Given the power that Muronyu displayed, which could easily destroy the opponent's arm, it was no problem for him to destroy the high-level imperishable realm expert's body. The corners of Patriarch Bloodrain's eyes twitched, and he snorted coldly. His big hand directly reached out. Thus, everyone saw Patriarch Bloodrain's big hand tear through the void and quickly grab Muronyu's hand that was attacking the high-level Great Saint. Patriarch Bloodrain's big hand was about to grab Muronyu's hand. However, at this moment, everyone suddenly felt a layer of ripples appear in the void in front of Patriarch Bloodrain's big hand. A strange scene happened in front of everyone. Patriarch Bloodrain's big hand was still quickly grabbing forward. However, it went straight through Muronyu's hand. It was as if Muronyu was an illusion. However, Muronyu's fist went straight in and ruthlessly smashed into the high-level imperishable realm expert's body. After a loud bang, the high-level imperishable realm expert didn't even have time to scream before he was completely blown up by Muronyu. Moreover, when his body was blown up, his soul was directly devoured by Muronyu. It became a strand of soul power in Muronyu's soul pool. High-level imperishable realm expert is just SOSO. Muronyu withdrew his hand and said disdainfully, "Shock. Incomparable shock." Other than shock, there was no other expression on everyone's faces. They clearly saw Patriarch Bloodrain's big hand reach for Muronyu. But why couldn't he catch him? That high-level saint was killed even though Ancestor Bloodrain had stepped in to save him. What was going on? Could it be that Muronyu was stronger than the Bloodrain ancestor? Thus, they all looked at the Elder of Shuiyu, their faces filled with confusion. The Bloodrain Patriarch's face darkened as he glared at Muronyu with an ominous glint in his eyes. Others didn't know, but as the person involved, he clearly knew what had just happened. Muronyu used the power of time laws to move his hand to a different time and space. Therefore, even if the direction of his hand didn't change, he couldn't touch Muronyu at all in two different time and space. That was why the scene just now had happened. Although he was shocked by the power of Muronyu's time laws, Patriarch Bloodrain was abnormally angry. The scene just now had made him lose all face. The Grand Patriarch Bloodrain couldn't even save a disciple of his sect, and could only watch as the disciple was killed. This was no longer just a loss of face. Muronyu had ruthlessly slapped him in the face a few times, and the slaps were loud and clear. "Kid, you're very good. How dare you kill my Mountain Bloodrain disciple in front of me?" Very good. Patriarch Blood Rain was so angry that he laughed, killing intent surging wildly from his body. Fang Tian's face lit up when he saw this. He was laughing so hard that flowers were blooming in his heart. Let's fight. It's best if they all die. Huh. If it weren't for the occasion, Fang Tianhe probably would have laughed out loud. Murongyu looked at Patriarch Blood Rain with a smile and suddenly asked, Patriarch Blood Rain, do you still remember Lu Hao's song? Patriarch Blood Rain paused. Then a cold light flashed through his eyes. Kill! Just as he thought of Lu Hao's song, Murongyu suddenly shouted. At the same time, Patriarch Blood Rain felt an inexplicable force wrap around his body. Patriarch Blood Rain coldly snorted, and an incomparably huge force burst out, wanting to break the force that enveloped him. At the same time, Murongyu made his move. The soul pool in his soul space erupted like a volcano. Soul power rushed out like a torrent, instantly enveloping the indestructible stage and profound sage stage powerhouses of Mountain Blood Rain. Heaven-destroying Starnet, a soul attack battle skill that split one's soul into countless parts. Each part contained soul energy that was several times more powerful than the original, and it came crashing down. At the same time, Murongyu summoned the Yin-Yang Universe Cauldron, which burst out with a primal chaos flame, carrying a terrifying power that could destroy the world. Put on, put on, put on. This was the first time that Murongyu had used a soul attack, and it was a group attack. In an instant, the super powerhouses of Mountain Blood Rain began to fall in large numbers. One by one, they fell from the sky, no longer having any aura of life. In just a moment, more than a dozen powerhouses had their souls destroyed, and this number was still rising. Kill! At the same time that Murongyu attacked, the little lowly also made her move. Her figure flashed, and she had already rushed to the side of a person. The giant axe in her hand slashed down, and that profound sage stage powerhouse was immediately split in half. This was because this person had rushed into Murongyu's soul attack and didn't have time to dodge or counterattack. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been so easily killed by the little lowly. At the same time, the Yin-Yang Universe Cauldron had also rapidly smashed down, turning an indestructible stage powerhouse into a bloody mist. Murongyu's big hand made a grabbing motion in the air, and in the next moment, a saber condensed from his power appeared in his hand, and he slashed out. Chapter 1341. Puff. Although the saber condensed from Murongyu's power couldn't compare to a high-grade sacred tool, it had no problem killing a high-level undead stage expert or even a profound sage. He attacked again and again. Under the dual impact of the time force and soul force, the experts of Blood Rain Mountain simply didn't have time to react. Their souls were either directly torn apart by the soul force or banished to a different space-time by the time force. Murongyu was like a god of death as he repeatedly slashed out with the saber in his hand, one slash after another. These undead stage and profound sage stage sages were cut down one by one like cutting melons and vegetables. In just a few breaths of time, under the shocked gazes of the surrounding people, except for the strongest Blood Rain ancestor, the rest of the experts of Blood Rain Mountain were all killed by Murongyu and the little lowly. In fact, the little lowly had only killed one of them. The rest had all died at the hands of Murongyu. Dead, all dead. The surrounding people stared at Murongyu's side with dumbfounded expressions. While they were shocked, they also felt happy. This was because the disciples of Blood Rain Mountain usually didn't shrink from committing all kinds of crimes. And because of the blood curse, the people of White Sun City didn't dare to touch the disciples of Blood Rain Mountain. Therefore, the disciples of Blood Rain Mountain became more and more arrogant, and they didn't dare to do anything in White Sun City. But once they left White Sun City, this area would become the domain of Blood Rain Mountain. You dare to kill the disciples of Blood Rain Mountain? As long as they sense the blood curse, not only would you die, but your friends and relatives would also die. Therefore, these sages avoided the disciples of Blood Rain Mountain like snakes and scorpions and didn't dare to say anything. Now that they saw Murong Yu kill the experts of Blood Rain Mountain one after another, if not for the fact that Blood Rain Ancestor hadn't been killed yet, they would have clapped and cheered. Bang! After Murong Yu killed all the experts of Blood Rain Mountain, Blood Rain Ancestor, who had been trapped in a different space-time by Murong Yu's time force, finally broke through Murong Yu's time force and rushed out of the different space-time, returning to the same space-time. But the first thing he saw was corpses all over the ground. All dead. Ancestor Shui Yu was stunned for a moment before he flew into a rage. The berserk aura of a peak 9th stage profound sage erupted from his body and swept in all directions like a flood. Bang! 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 Immediately, the buildings around Blood Rain Ancestor were torn apart. Some of the saints who were unable to retreat in time were directly turned into clouds of blood mist and died an unnatural death. Little bastard died. Ancestor Blood Rain roared furiously as he stretched out his hand and grabbed fiercely at Murong Yu with the intention of killing him. Soul Tyrant Fist. With a thought, Murong Yu's immense soul power shot out from his soul pool. It formed an invisible fist the size of a mountain and smashed towards Ancestor Blood Rain. Soul power at the 6th firmament of the 2-star stage. Originally, Murong Yu's soul spirit was only at the 2nd firmament of 2 stars. However, after killing so many imperishable realm and profound sage realm experts of the Blood Rain Mountain, Murong Yu had directly devoured and refined their souls. Although those people were ordinary souls, they contained immense soul power. However, it also contained an enormous amount of soul energy. The higher one's realm, the greater the amount of soul energy one possessed. After refining it, Murong Yu's soul had actually advanced by a minor realm. After reaching the 6th firmament of 2 stars, his soul power had become even more powerful. An incomparably strong aura of danger instantly shrouded Ancestor Blood Rain's heart. Ancestor Blood Rain's heart trembled. With a thought, the big hand that was grabbing Murong Yu moved horizontally in the void and actually grabbed the Soul Tyrant Fist. At the same time, the power in his body quickly shook and occupied the entire soul space, wanting to block the Soul Tyrant Fist. Soul Devouring Cut. Murong Yu sneered inwardly. His soul power was like a blade, and the soul aura that erupted from it was several times stronger than the Soul Tyrant Fist. It stood there and destroyed everything as it rushed towards Ancestor Blood Rain. Boom! Ancestor Blood Rain's fist collided with the Soul Tyrant Fist. It directly shattered the Soul Tyrant Fist. However, before he could rejoice, a part of the Soul Tyrant Fist power that had been shattered had already torn through the seal of his power and entered his soul space. He could only mobilize his power to surge forward, wanting to crush this Soul Tyrant Fist. Even the strength of a peak profound sage couldn't completely crush this Soul Tyrant Fist. How powerful was Murong Yu's Soul Tyrant Fist? In fact, Soul Tyrant Fist was different from ordinary power. There were essentially 2 different kinds of power. Ordinary power simply couldn't resist Soul Tyrant Fist. After all, Soul Tyrant Fist was an invisible and intangible existence. With Murong Yu's current strength, even if an undead stage powerhouse resisted with all their strength, they wouldn't be able to stop the Soul Tyrant Fist's attack. If it weren't for Ancestor Blood Rain's powerful strength, he wouldn't have been able to stop the Soul Tyrant Fist's attack. But even so, his soul was violently shaken. On the other side, Murong Yu's soul devouring slash also cut down everything, causing Ancestor Blood Rain's complexion to change, and he was forced to retreat. Exile of Time. As Ancestor Blood Rain retreated, Murong Yu sneered. The Time Tyrant Fist surged out like a torrent, instantly submerging the space-time around Ancestor Blood Rain. After seeing the power of the Time Tyrant Fist, Ancestor Blood Rain was greatly shocked, and he immediately burst out with a strong power to crush the Time Tyrant Fist. However, the Time Tyrant Fist didn't directly cover his body, but instead wrapped up a large part of the void around him. Therefore, without waiting for Ancestor Blood Rain's power to erupt, the space-time he was in had already been banished. Star Net exterminating the heavens. After banishing Ancestor Blood Rain, Muronyu once again used his soul attack, frantically attacking Ancestor Blood Rain. After being banished to a different space-time, no matter how powerful Ancestor Blood Rain was, he couldn't attack Muronyu through space-time. However, Muronyu could attack Ancestor Blood Rain. Not only him, but anyone who controlled the Time Tyrant Fist could do so. It was just that the attack would be infinitely weakened. Even so, the incomparably violent soul attack still caused Patriarch Blood Rain to roar madly. In the end, Murongyu's soul attack didn't shatter Ancestor Blood Rain's soul. However, it still shook his soul to the point of almost shattering. This was already considered an injury. Little bastard died. Ancestor Blood Rain shattered the Time Tyrant Fist and stepped out of the other space-time. As he roared, he quickly threw a punch at Murongyu. However, a voice that made him gnash his teeth rang in his ears again. Exile of Time. As a result, Ancestor Blood Rain tragically discovered that he had been banished to another space-time. He was immediately enraged and crazily attacked. Soul Tyrant Fist, Soul Devouring Slash, Star Luo, Annihilating Sky. Murongyu's soul pool was constantly rioting, and an incomparably strong force crazily attacked Ancestor Blood Rain. However, Ancestor Blood Rain's strength was monstrous, and it was difficult to kill him in a short time. Seeing this scene, the surrounding people were shocked. One by one, they looked at Murongyu as if they were looking at a monster. A rank 1 undead realm expert had actually trapped a peak profound sage realm expert. Too powerful, too abnormal. While they were shocked, they also felt incomparable fear towards Murongyu. As a result, one by one, they involuntarily retreated. They were afraid of provoking Murongyu. Although Murongyu seemed unable to kill Ancestor Blood Rain for a while, they weren't Ancestor Blood Rain and didn't have such powerful strength. If he was in a mood to throw a star exterminating heavens, then they would fall in large numbers. Murongyu frowned slightly. Ancestor Blood Rain's strength was beyond his expectations. Although he could temporarily trap Ancestor Blood Rain, he couldn't do anything to Ancestor Blood Rain's soul. Moreover, he didn't have much power of time left. Once the power of time was exhausted, Murongyu wouldn't be able to trap Ancestor Blood Rain anymore. At that time, it would be even more impossible to kill him just by relying on the power of the soul. Murongyu's cultivation base allowed him to cross 2 realms to kill enemies. However, he was only a rank 1 undead realm expert and could only kill low-level profound sages at most. Murongyu suddenly looked at the little lowly and asked, "Little lowly, can you lend me your axe?" Her axe ignored power and was perfect for killing Ancestor Blood Rain. However, because Ancestor Blood Rain was trapped in a different space-time, the little lowly couldn't kill him at all. Therefore, Murongyu could only do it himself. However, the little lowly shook her head and said, "The axe is my sacred weapon, and only I can use it to ignore power and defense." Well, this plan had been aborted. Murongyu was depressed. If the power of time is strong enough, we can directly banish Ancestor Blood Rain to a distant space-time. At that time, even if he can break the power of time, I don't know if he can return to this space-time. Absorb him in a Hichu Luoshu and use the suppression power of Hichu Luoshu to kill him. In the end, Murongyu could only decide to use Hichu Luoshu. Moreover, he wasn't sure if he could kill Ancestor Blood Rain. Therefore, when Ancestor Blood Rain broke the power of time again and stepped out of the different space-time, he was directly absorbed into the Hichu Luoshu world by Murongyu. Immediately, Murongyu ignited his primal chaos Saint Vein and raised the power of Hichu Luoshu to the extreme, quickly suppressing him. "You're overestimating yourself." Ancestor Blood Rain roared, and his power erupted, directly resisting Hichu Luoshu's suppression power. It wasn't that Hichu Luoshu wasn't strong, but that Murongyu wasn't strong enough. However, Murongyu didn't intend to rely on Hichu Luoshu's power to suppress Ancestor Blood Rain. Therefore, the power of time and soul force once again strangled Chapter 1342. Bang! Blood Rain Ancestor was once again banished to a different space-time. And this time, because he was in Hichu Luoshu, his whole body was suppressed. Originally, he only needed a few breaths of time to break Murong Yu's power of time. But now he couldn't break it. The power of time seemed to have suddenly increased by dozens of times, fiercely suppressing him. At the same time, Murong Yu's soul pond began to violently surge. Soul devouring / after soul devouring / was constantly sent out, frantically trying to strangle Blood Rain Ancestor. In Hichu Luoshu, Murong Yu was the master. In the beginning, he couldn't suppress Blood Rain Ancestor, which allowed him to be unscrupulous in Hichu Luoshu. But once he was suppressed, Blood Rain Ancestor couldn't make a comeback. After being suppressed, Blood Rain Ancestor's strength sharply declined, while Murong Yu's strength became even stronger. Under this situation, Blood Rain Ancestor's tragedy began. Facing the storm-like attacks of the soul-devouring / Blood Rain Ancestor roared in anger. But he was helpless and could only divide his power into two parts. One part was used to resist Murong Yu's soul attack, and the other part was used to attack the power of time, try to return to the normal space-time. However, it didn't take long for the originally evenly divided power to lose its balance. More and more power was used to defend against the soul attack. There was no other way. Murong Yu's soul attack was very violent. His ordinary soul couldn't resist it. Blood Rain Ancestor anxiously roared again and again. But how could Murong Yu not be anxious? Because his power of time was about to be exhausted. If his power of time was exhausted, Hichu Luoshu might not be able to suppress Blood Rain Ancestor. Murong Yu felt helpless. It seems that I overestimated myself and underestimated Blood Rain Ancestor. Murong Yu had estimated that he could easily kill a high-level profound sage. But now, it seemed that he had overestimated himself. Perhaps this wasn't his problem, but rather Patriarch Blood Rain being too powerful. However, Murong Yu believed that he would eventually be able to kill Patriarch Blood Rain. At most, he would just have to fight him to the end. At this point, other than exhausting the other party, there was no other way. Unless Murong Yu gave up on killing Patriarch Blood Rain and quickly left this place. Let's go all out. Murong Yu gritted his teeth as his soul power burst out continuously. Soul devouring / The power was getting stronger and stronger. Patriarch Blood Rain's lungs were about to explode from anger. However, it was unable to do anything to Murong Yu's power of time and was unable to charge out. That's the last strand of the power of time. Murong Yu's eyes turned sharp, and he thought to himself. Then, he banished Patriarch Blood Rain, who had broken through the power of time and returned to this space-time. At this time, Patriarch Blood Rain was not in a good state either. To be precise, he was at the end of his road. He was constantly being suppressed and crushed by the power of time, which consumed a lot of his strength. His strength had fallen from the peak of the Profound Sage Realm to the 8th rank of the Profound Sage Realm. Most importantly, his strength was less than 50% of his original strength. Am I going to be killed by an undead realm bastard? Patriarch Blood Rain suddenly felt sad. He was very unwilling. While he was in a trance, Murong Yu's soul-devouring / finally succeeded in breaking his power and fiercely slashing his soul. Suddenly, a small part of his soul was cut off. The tearing pain almost made Patriarch Blood Rain faint. But at this moment, Murong Yu's spiritual force was like a flood that had broken a dam. It crazily rushed in and tried to strangle his soul. Patriarch Blood Rain did not have time to wail and hurriedly try to block it. But how could he block it? In the end, he could only watch as his soul was torn to pieces by Murong Yu. Then, an incomparably huge force acted on these soul fragments and swallowed them. Plop, plop. The sound of a heavy object falling to the ground spread. One was Patriarch Blood Rain, who had died because his soul had been destroyed. The other was Murong Yu. At this time, Murong Yu's power of time had been exhausted, and his strength had been consumed by 70 to 80%. In the huge soul pond, his soul power had almost reached the bottom. This time, Patriarch Bloodrain had really been exhausted to death. The power of the soul, the power of time, his own cultivation, and the He Too and the Book of the Luo. None of these four could be missing. Even if any of them were missing, Muronyu might not have been able to kill Patriarch Bloodrain. Because even if he had all four, it was almost impossible for him to kill Patriarch Bloodrain. It seems that if I want to easily kill a high-level profound sage, I need to at least reach the 8th or 9th stage of the 2 stars. If I can reach a 3-star soul, I will definitely be invincible in the profound sage realm. Muronyu sat down cross-legged and began to recover the various powers he had consumed while thinking. However, although it was difficult for him to kill a high-level profound sage, he could still protect himself. However, the ability to protect oneself was much stronger than the strength of the enemy. In the battle with Patriarch Bloodrain, Patriarch Bloodrain's power had not even touched the corner of Muronyu's clothes, let alone Patriarch Bloodrain. Even an ancient sage would find it difficult to kill Muronyu. In the Hichu Luoshu world, time was accelerating, and Muronyu's consumed power was quickly recovering. Among them, the fastest to recover was his cultivation base. It quickly recovered to the peak of the 1st stage of the undead realm. Then came the power of time. This was because the power of time was transformed from the foundation of one's strength. Moreover, it could only transform 10% of one's strength. The recovery speed of his soul power was also not slow. Because he had swallowed Patriarch Bloodrain's soul fragments, he had replenished a considerable part of his soul power. However, it was impossible to restore his soul power to its original peak state in a short time, not to mention filling up the huge soul pond. Chua, with a thought, Muronyu stepped out of the Hichu Luoshu. He appeared. Seeing Muronyu appear, the eyes of the surrounding people were all fixed on Muronyu. There was shock, disbelief, incredulity, and even expectation. Muronyu and Patriarch Bloodrain disappeared at the same time, and Patriarch Bloodrain hasn't appeared yet. Could it be that Muronyu killed him? After waiting for a few breaths of time and not seeing Patriarch Bloodrain appear, the surrounding people began to secretly discuss. All of them were looking forward to it. On the other hand, Fang Tianhe looked at Muronyu with an extremely ugly expression, his heart filled with bitterness. Even a peak profound sage like Ancestor Bloodrain was killed? How can he be so powerful? Glancing at the surrounding people, Muronyu's gaze stopped on Fang Tianhe's face, and he said with a smile, "City Lord Fang, are there any other powerhouses you invited? However, if they are not as powerful as Patriarch Bloodrain, then forget it. If they come, they will just be throwing away their lives." Hearing this, Fang Tianhe's expression became even uglier. On the other hand, the surrounding people were looking at Muronyu with faces full of shock and expectation. You really killed Patriarch Bloodrain? Fang Tianhe looked at Muronyu with disbelief. Muronyu smiled contemptuously, and with a thought, Patriarch Bloodrain's corpse came out of the Hichu Luoshu. It really is Patriarch Bloodrain. This is impossible. Patriarch Bloodrain was a peak profound sage. How could you, an undead, kill him? That's impossible. Fang Tianhe roared. What was different from Fang Tianhe was the reaction of the surrounding people. When they confirmed that it was Patriarch Bloodrain's corpse, they cheered. Patriarch Bloodrain had died, and a large number of powerhouses had been killed. It was only a matter of time before Bloodrain Mountain declined. Now, they could make a move against those disciples of the Bloodrain Mountain who had bullied them to the point that Yanu didn't dare to speak, and kill them all. City Lord Fang, asterisk plop, asterisk just as Muronyu was about to speak, Fang Tianhe knelt in front of Muronyu and said, "Muronyu, don't kill me. I was wrong. I shouldn't have betrayed you. For Zuin's sake, please don't kill me. Spare my dog life." Shock. Even the people who were cheering were shocked. They all looked at Fang Tianhe with disbelief. This was the city lord who had ruled White Sun City for countless years. He had no backbone and no dignity. Father, you? Fang Zuin had just been pulled back from the different space-time by Muronyu. She happened to see Fang Tianhe kneeling down. Looking at Fong Tianhe, a smile suddenly appeared on Murong Yu's face. However, everyone could see that his smile contained strong disdain and contempt. City Lord Fong, what are you doing? I don't think I said I was going to kill you. Although Murong, you wouldn't kill such a person, it was necessary to beat a drowning dog and make him feel worse. Hearing this, Fong Tianhe's face stiffened and became more and more unsightly. His heart was filled with incomparable resentment. Let's go. Murong Yu threw Blood Rain Ancestor's corpse back into the Hichu Luo Shu. Then, he left the City Lord's mansion with Yu Mengqing and the others. Only Fong Tianhe and the City Lord's mansion's people were left kneeling on the ground with an unsightly expression. Father, you've disappointed me. Fong Ziwen looked at Fong Tianhe. She had already known about Fong Tianhe's cowardice. However, he had never thought that Yi Futian would be so shameless as to be willing to lower himself. After fiercely glaring at Murong Yu's back, Fong Ziwen soared into the sky and shot out of White Sun City. After what happened today, she didn't have the face to continue staying in White Sun City. As for Fong Tianhe, he had already broken her heart. She didn't want to continue following him. Big scoundrel, didn't you say that the Leaf family is one of the 3 great families of White Sun City? Why is there no one here? When Murong Yu and the others arrived in front of the Leaf family, the entire Leaf family was empty. There wasn't a single person. Everyone had fled. Murong Yu was immediately depressed. However, Murong Yu was a bit better. His enemies were mainly Li Di and his brothers. They were all personally killed by him. The most depressed person present was Wen Yi. This guy had been imprisoned by the Leaf family for so many years. He had long wanted to destroy the Leaf family. However, he suddenly realized that everyone had fled. Wen Yi was so depressed that he wanted to vomit blood. Chapter 1343. Who's there? Come down. In front of the Blood Rain Mountain's gate, several figures shot over from afar. Before they even got close to the gate, several disciples of the Blood Rain Mountain soared into the sky and blocked them. They roared at the newcomers with murderous intent. There was even a disciple of the Blood Rain Mountain who threw a punch at the person who had just arrived. The disciples of the Blood Rain Mountain are really arrogant. We haven't even gotten close to the Blood Rain Mountain, and they're already like this. Do they really think that the Blood Rain Mountain belongs to them? Seeing this scene, Yu Mengqing frowned. The other women were also quite displeased. They were Murong Yu's group. After killing the Blood Rain ancestor, they went straight to the Leaf family. But immediately, the house was empty. Not a single person was left. Of course, those people were all scattered in the White Sun City. Not many people left the White Sun City. After all, the time was too short. Even if they were prepared, they couldn't escape in time. Originally, with Murong Yu's strength, he could find those people of the Leaf family in the White Sun City. But he didn't have that many. In the end, the extremely depressed one erased the Leaf family to the ground and killed his way to the Blood Rain Mountain. Behind them, many sages of the White Sun City also secretly followed them. If Murong Yu wanted to destroy the Blood Rain Mountain, those guys would definitely add fuel to the fire and kill the people of the Blood Rain Mountain. Reckless, the little loli shouted angrily. Taking a step forward, she turned into a stream of light and rushed towards the 2 disciples of the Blood Rain Mountain. Halfway there, the giant axe in her hand had already shattered the void and fiercely chopped down. Puff! The disciple of the Blood Rain Mountain was only a great sage. His strength was originally far inferior to the little lowly who was at the undead stage. Therefore, he didn't even have time to react and was already chopped in half by the little lowly's axe. You dare to kill my Blood Rain Mountain's disciple? You're really audacious. You're dead. The disciple of the Blood Rain Mountain shouted with a sharp voice. Noisy, the little lowly glanced at him with disgust and chopped with the giant axe in her hand. The disciple of the Blood Rain Mountain didn't even have time to think of escaping and was already chopped in half. Whoosh, 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 hearing the shrill cry of that disciple. Countless disciples of Blood Rain Mountain immediately soared into the sky. Each of them was filled with killing intent as they rushed over. What bullshit, Blood Rain Mountain? Break for me. For some reason, the little lowly didn't like this blood rain mountain. With a cold shout, the giant axe in his hand slashed out fiercely. With a loud bang, the majestic mountain gate of the blood rain mountain was directly smashed into pieces. What audacity! You dare to destroy my blood rain mountain? You're courting death. Brothers, kill those fanatics for me. Seeing that their mountain gate had been destroyed, the disciples of Blood Rain Mountain immediately became angry. One by one, they charged over with murderous intent. The little lowly's face revealed an excited expression. Her figure flashed, and she had already rushed forward. Then, like a wolf in a flock of sheep, he brandished the giant axe in his hand vigorously, killing these people until they wailed like ghosts and howled like wolves. Large numbers of them fell. Unexpectedly, there was no room for the little lowly to make a move. The little lowly's strength was definitely unparalleled within the undying realm. In addition, the giant axe had the ability to ignore strength and defense. Even undead realm experts weren't her match. That day in the left origin city, even an ancient sage was killed by her. It could be said that she was extremely powerful. Of course, if the little lowly's giant axe didn't get close to the undead realm expert, it would be difficult for the little lowly to kill him. However, although the little lowly was incomparably valiant, there were many disciples of Blood Rain Mountain. After one died, two more rushed forward. In a short while, the little lowly had already been firmly surrounded by the numerous disciples of Blood Rain Mountain, and a portion of the disciples had already charged towards Murong Yu and the others. Seeing this scene, those people who had followed Murong Yu and the others to watch the show all retreated far away. They had only come to watch the show. They didn't want to provoke any bloody disaster. A cold light flashed through Murong Yu's eyes. Kill them all. In his eyes, the bodies of the disciples of Blood Rain Mountain were emitting a black halo. This was the halo of star-level villains. So much so that some people's bodies were like charcoal. The level of villains was extremely high. Murong Yu didn't have any psychological burden to kill these people. As he spoke, Murong Yu's soul pool had already begun to riot. Waves after waves of incomparably violent soul power strangled out. Sky-destroying stars. The soul power was divided into billions of strands. Each strand carried an extremely powerful force. It was like an incomparably huge sky net enveloping down. Puff, puff, puff. How could these ordinary disciples of the Blood Rain Mountain withstand the annihilation of the star net exterminating the heavens? They didn't even know how they died. One by one, their souls were constantly torn apart and fell in large batches. However, Murong Yu was able to devour the soul fragments that had been torn apart. Suddenly, the soul power in Murong Yu's soul pool gradually increased. Go! Murong Yu shouted in a low voice. He took a step forward and appeared in the sky above Blood Rain Mountain. An extremely huge divine thought extended out and instantly enveloped the entire Blood Rain Mountain. Sky-destroying stars. With a thought, Murong Yu once again performed this move that was suitable for group attacks. If soul power could be seen, then everyone would see Murong Yu's soul power enveloping the entire Blood Rain Mountain like a spider web. Then it poured down directly. Suddenly, the saints of White Sun City who were watching outside Blood Rain Mountain saw an extremely spectacular scene. It was also an unforgettable scene for them. Countless people of Blood Rain Mountain either rose into the sky and surrounded Murong Yu and the others, or rushed out of the cultivation place. Everyone in their line of sight. In that instant, all of them fell down without a sound. Hundreds of thousands of disciples all fell to the ground at the same time. There was no breath of life. They were all dead. Is this the ability of soul sanctification? Seeing this scene, the saints of White Sun City, the people of Blood Rain Mountain who weren't killed, and even Yu Mengqing and the others, looked at Murong Yu with incomparable shock. Especially the disciples of Blood Rain Mountain. All of them were scared silly. They just looked at Murong Yu with dull faces. Demon, demon. Suddenly, a disciple shouted loudly. He turned around and shot toward the distance. Immediately, the others also reacted. One by one, they used their speed and fled quickly like fish scattering after a tree fell. Murong-yu didn't kill them all. The halos on these people were white or neither black nor white. They were all good people or not star-level villains. In other words, there were hundreds of thousands of star-level villains in the entire Blood Rain Mountain. One could imagine how the people of Blood Rain Mountain usually did all kinds of evil. Murong-yu looked indifferently at the people outside Blood Rain Mountain who were watching the show. Then he directly sat down cross-legged in the void. The power of the soul-devouring pearl erupted. Immediately, the soul fragments of hundreds of thousands of saints were swallowed into his soul space like a torrent. Although the souls of these people weren't strong and the soul power they contained was very weak, but they won in quantity. It was much bigger than the Blood Rain ancestor and the others combined. Therefore, the soul power in Murong-yu's soul pool began to grow rapidly. As for the saints in the distance, they didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Murong-yu was simply too frightening. If he were to suddenly attack them, they'd be dead for sure. However, while they were shocked and frightened, they also felt happy. After all, Blood Rain Mountain had been destroyed by Murong-yu. Looking at the Blood Rain Mountain full of corpses, some of the saints became excited. Blood Rain Mountain had dominated this area for countless years. There must be a lot of treasures in their treasure vault. In addition, there were the storage rings of hundreds of thousands of disciples. The wealth they had was absolutely shocking. But no one dared to move. As long as Murong-yu was here, they didn't dare to move. However, they didn't leave. They wanted to pick up the leftovers. After all, even if Murong-yu plundered the Blood Rain Mountain's treasure vault. But who could guarantee that he didn't miss anything? And there are some things that Murong-yu might not be interested in. Rumble. In the soul space, the soul pool with a radius of 500 miles was like a volcano that was constantly surging. Originally, his soul power had reached the average level, but now it had reached 80%. And as Murong-yu continued to devour the soul fragments of the disciples of Blood Rain Mountain, his soul power was still rapidly increasing. Half a day later, when Murong-yu had devoured all the soul fragments of hundreds of thousands of disciples of Blood Rain Mountain, his entire soul pool was almost full. Even if he was dissatisfied, it wasn't much different. Now his soul power was equivalent to endless. But the power of time was still so little. He had to find a way to increase the power of time. Murong-yu thought in his heart and slowly stood up. Glancing at the corpses on the ground, he frowned slightly. With a thought, a burst of power burst out from his body and intertwined into a huge heavenly king in the void. Then it covered all the corpses. In the next moment, one by one, the storage rings flew into the air and shot toward Murong-yu. Finally, they were collected by him into the Hichu Luo Shu. Although these ordinary disciples of Blood Rain Mountain didn't have anything valuable, Murong-yu couldn't use them at all. But in the future, Shangzhen's people could use them. Seeing the storage rings being collected by Murong-yu one by one, the people in the distance showed envy on their faces. But that was it. They didn't dare to have any ideas about Murong-yu. After collecting all the storage rings, the yin-yang cauldron shot out and burst out with the flame of primal chaos. In an instant, the entire Blood Rain Mountain was submerged. In just the blink of an eye, the countless corpses and buildings that filled the sky disappeared without a trace. They were just corpses. They couldn't withstand the flame of primal chaos and were directly annihilated. Chapter 1344. In an instant, the entire Blood Rain Mountain was razed to the ground, and there were no more corpses. Yu Mengqing and the others, who were not used to seeing corpses, gradually recovered. As for whether they felt that Murong-yu was too cruel, killing hundreds of thousands of people so easily, if they were just inexperienced people, they might have such thoughts. But they came from a cultivation world or the immortal world step by step. They had long been accustomed to life and death. Moreover, they had already seen this kind of thing in the immortal world or the god world. Back when he had fought with the sages, he had killed millions of them. Okay, let's go and empty the treasury of Blood Rain Mountain. Morongyu indifferently said. Then, he took a step forward and arrived before the treasury at the back of Bloody Rain Mountain. It was a 9-story building. It was surrounded by countless arrays and restrictions. Without permission, even profound sages, or even ancient sages, wouldn't be able to enter. But for Morongyu, there was no pressure. His figure flashed, and he entered the treasury. However, Mu Liyue and the others were depressed. They were not Morongyu, so they could not enter. Even the little lowly was the same. Although she could travel through the void, she did not have Morongyu's ability to ignore restrictions and arrays. Blood Rain Mountain was worthy of being a force countless times stronger than White Sun City's City Lord's mansion. Just the first floor of the treasury had surpassed the entire treasury of White Sun City's City Lord's mansion. Although there were ordinary holy pills, holy crystals, and low-grade holy artifacts stored here, there were no higher-grade treasures. But the quantity made up for the lack of quality. According to Morongyu's estimation, the total value of the treasures on the first floor of Blood Rain Mountain was comparable to the treasury of White Sun City's City Lord's mansion. But these treasures were of no use to Morongyu. With a thought, he put all the treasures in a Hichu Luo shoe. Not even a single holy pill was left. Then, Morongyu stepped on the stairs to the second floor. The items stored on the second floor were obviously much more advanced than those on the first floor. The first floor was used to store low-grade Saint artifacts, while the second floor was used to store mid-grade Saint artifacts. However, because the level of the treasures was higher, there were fewer items on the second floor. Wherever Morongyu went, it was as if millions of invisible hands had grown out of his body, causing the surrounding treasures to rapidly disappear. When he reached the third floor, there was nothing left on the second floor. The third floor stored high-grade Saint artifacts. It did not have any effect on Morongyu, so Morongyu did not have any intention of stopping and directly collected the treasures. The fourth floor, based on how the treasures were stored, it should be where the top-tier Saint artifacts were stored. But a top-grade Saint artifact was of great use to Morongyu. At his current stage, he could only refine a top-grade Saint artifact to increase his cultivation. Therefore, before he came up, he had some expectations in his heart. If the Blood Rain Mountain really had a top-grade Saint artifact, then he would be able to quickly raise his realm. He might even be able to reach the imperishable stage and meet the most basic requirement for true martial temple to recruit disciples. Compared to the 3 floors below, the 4th floor was much smaller. Looking around, there were many things stored here. However, there were no top-tier Saint artifacts. There were only some more precious Saint elixirs and heaven and earth treasures. Perhaps those elixirs were more precious, but they were of no use to Morongyu. Soul returning and spirit replenishing heavenly pill? There were many elixirs stored on the 4th floor. Morongyu only glanced at them and wanted to collect them and go up to the 5th floor as soon as possible. However, at this moment, the corner of his eye caught a wooden box with the words soul returning and spirit replenishing heavenly pill written on it. Morongyu's heart skipped a beat. He immediately took the wooden box and opened it. Suddenly, a sparkling and translucent elixir the size of a longan appeared in his sight. When the wooden box was opened, an incomparably powerful soul aura was emitted. This is... Morongyu immediately became excited. His face was full of excitement. A Saint elixir to replenish soul power. Morongyu was extremely excited. There were all kinds of elixirs in the holy world to replenish energy, heal injuries, and so on. Naturally, there were also elixirs to replenish and repair the soul. However, there were too few soul saints, so no one refined such elixirs. Moreover, the ingredients for these elixirs were extremely rare. Therefore, until now, there were no Saint elixirs suitable for soul saints in the holy world. Relatively speaking, there were more Saint elixirs to repair the soul. However, they were also extremely rare. Each one of them was almost priceless. However, there were too few that could replenish soul power. This was because the ingredients for refining the elixir were too rare. Moreover, this elixir was only used to replenish soul power. It was a one-time consumption item. If the price was too high, no one would buy it. If the price was too low, they wouldn't even be able to recoup the cost. Therefore, over time, this elixir was almost extinct in the holy world. Even if they were left behind in the past or refined by soul saints themselves. However, they would only consume it for themselves and would not spread it out. Moron, you have been looking for this elixir for a long time. It was a saint elixir to replenish soul power and repair the soul. However, he couldn't find it. Therefore, when he saw this elixir in the Blood Rain Mountain's treasury, he was immediately excited. To him, this was not just a single elixir, but countless elixirs. Because he had the yin yang cauldron, he could analyze the prescription and refine it. In this way, his soul power would not be exhausted in the future. Ichu, can you analyze this elixir? Suppressing the excitement in his heart, Moron, you kept the soul-returning spirit replenishing heavenly pill into the Hichu Luo Shu and asked at the same time. Hichu did not give a definite answer. He just sent it into the yin-yang cauldron immediately. Moron, you did not mind and continued to search the fourth floor to see if there were any suitable saint elixirs for him. It would be best if it could repair the soul. However, he was disappointed in the end. Other than finding a pill that could quickly raise quasi-saint to the saint realm, there was nothing else. But in the blink of an eye, he had returned to normal. Obtaining a soul-returning spirit, replenishing heavenly pill was already a big gain. One should not be too greedy. Moreover, the great overarching saint elixir was also not bad. It could raise the cultivation realm of Shenzhen and other quasi-saint cultivators in the future. However, there was only one. The Blood Rain Mountain must have stored it here for research. Fifth floor. When Moron Yuja set foot on the fifth floor, an incomparably huge amount of world's essence, chi, surged like a tide. Looking around, there were piles of high-grade saint crystals the size of hills. There were top-grade saint crystals, and even saint crystals. However, there were no saint veins. Although the Blood Rain Mountain was powerful, it was nothing in the entire holy world. It was normal that there were no saint veins. Because after Moron Yu killed the Blood Rain ancestor, he only found 3 low-grade saint veins in his storage ring. Moreover, those 3 saint veins were still kept in the back of the storage ring by the Blood Rain ancestor. Presumably, he was unwilling to use them. Moron Yu didn't reject anyone. After looting everything on the 5th floor, he went up to the 6th floor. Finally, a familiar energy fluctuation was transmitted over. Top-grade saint artifact. As far as the eye could see, the entire 6th floor was filled with beams of intense light. However, there were only a dozen or so top-grade saint artifacts on the 6th floor. Moreover, these top-grade saint artifacts gave Moron Yu a feeling that they were ordinary saint artifacts among the top-grade saint artifacts. With the terrifying power Moron Yu needed to raise his cultivation realm, he could not guarantee that these dozen or so top-grade saint artifacts could raise his cultivation realm by a few small levels. If the 6th floor is a top-grade saint artifact, then the 7th floor should be a top-grade saint artifact, right? After collecting these top-grade saint artifacts, Moron Yu strode to the 7th floor. However, what made Moron Yu speechless was that the entire 7th floor was empty. Not to mention a top-grade saint artifact. There was not even a table. The same went for the 8th floor. With a gloomy face, Moron Yu finally walked to the 9th floor. However, what made Moron Yu feel strange was that there was something on the 9th floor. There was nothing on the 7th and 8th floor, but there was something on the 9th floor. What was this thing that was so precious? Moron Yu was curious and walked up. Blood Rain Grand Technique. It was a thread-bound book with yellowed pages. It was obvious that it had been there for many years. This is the cultivation technique of the Blood Rain Mountain. Blood Curse. Moron Yu's expression was somewhat strange as he picked up the so-called Blood Rain technique and started reading it. After a few glances, Moron Yu could not help but exclaim. Originally, it was said that the Blood Rain Mountain was built by the Blood Rain ancestor. Moreover, the blood curse that they cultivated was created by the Blood Rain ancestor. However, it seemed that this was not the case. This so-called Blood Rain Grand Technique was created by a certain ancient almighty. Moreover, that almighty was also called the Blood Rain Ancestor. However, his strength was much stronger than the Blood Rain Ancestor that Murong-Yu killed. This was because Murong-Yu discovered that this Blood Rain Grand technique was not as simple as a blood curse. Absorbing blood to increase one's realm. The higher the opponent's realm, the stronger the power of the blood, and the faster one's realm and strength would increase. This was equivalent to Murong-Yu cultivating his soul. The more souls he devoured, the more soul power he would have, and the higher his realm would be. However, the Blood Rain Grand technique was much more sinister. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was cruel. However, he had never heard of the disciples of the Blood Rain Mountain cultivating through this method. With doubts in his heart, Murong-Yu continued to read. Not long after, he finally found out why the Blood Rain Ancestor and the rest did not absorb the blood of others to cultivate. It was not that the Blood Rain Ancestor and the rest respected themselves and did not use this method to cultivate. That was because if they cultivated that way, they would die 9 times out of 10. Chapter 1345. The 9 Transformations of Blood Rain was the most basic process of cultivating the Blood Rain Grand technique. Only after experiencing the 9 Transformations of Blood Rain could one be considered to have successfully cultivated the Blood Rain Grand technique. The so-called 9 Transformations of Blood Rain was to undergo 9 transformations in the process of cultivation. With each transformation, one's strength would soar countless times. However, the transformation was to absorb enough murderous aura in the blood. The more murderous aura, the greater the impact on the cultivator's mind, soul, and so on. Some people would even go crazy and lose their usual sanity because of this. Moreover, during the 9 transformations, perhaps only one person in 10,000 could successfully transform. Such a dangerous technique, the Blood Rain Ancestor and the others naturally wouldn't cultivate it. What they cultivated was only a superficial part of the true Blood Rain Grand technique. They could only condense the blood curse. After roughly flipping through it, Murong-Yu threw this technique into the Hichu Luo Shu. This technique was too evil and dangerous. He didn't intend to let anyone cultivate it. Then, Murong-Yu entered the Hichu Luo Shu world. There are more than a dozen supreme sacred weapons, and the sacred weapons from the Blood Rain Ancestor, a total of 20. After refining them, I should be able to raise a few small realms, right? Murong-Yu's mind moved, and the Hichu Luo Shu began to burn the chaos sacred vein, accelerating time. Then, Murong-Yu swallowed the 20 top grade saint artifacts in one go. Instantly, the chaotic furnace in his body started to tremble. Then, the indestructible supreme sacred weapons quickly turned into the most primitive power and poured into Murong-Yu's body. Suddenly, Murong-Yu's strength skyrocketed. In a flash, Murong-Yu's strength had reached the peak of the first stage of the undead realm. Murong-Yu easily felt the invisible barrier between the first stage of the undead realm and the second stage of the undead realm. Impact. Pure and incomparably huge streams of power poured into Murong-Yu's body. Under his control, they crashed into the invisible barrier like a torrent. No one knew how much time had passed. It seemed like an instant, but it also seemed like tens of thousands of years had passed. Finally, under Murong-Yu's relentless attacks, the invisible barrier finally collapsed. Rumble, the meridians in Murong-Yu's body expanded several times. Streams of energy appeared out of nowhere and filled his body. At the same time, his 3 saint godheads seemed to have grown several times bigger, and the amount of energy they could contain had increased. Second level of the undead realm. His strength seemed to have increased by almost 10 times. Killing low-level profound sages would become much easier. Murong-Yu was quite satisfied with the powerful strength he possessed. However, when he saw the supreme quality saint artifacts in the furnace, his face could not help but twitch. He had actually lost 3 top-grade saint artifacts. In other words, He had consumed the power of 3 supreme quality saint artifacts to advance from the first stage of the undead realm to the second stage of the undead realm. Muronyu felt that his heart was about to stop. He was only in the second stage of the undead realm. If he reached the high-level undead realm, how many supreme quality saint artifacts would he need to advance by 1 stage? And to break through to the undead realm, would he need to refine supreme quality saint artifacts? At this moment, Muronyu felt a headache coming on. However, he soon stabilized his mind and continued to cultivate. After a long time, his body trembled violently, and an incomparably powerful aura erupted. His cultivation had broken through again, and he had finally reached the 3rd stage of the undead realm. His strength had soared again. Muronyu should have been happy with the increase in his strength. However, he was not happy at all. This was because he had used up a total of 6 sacred grade saint artifacts. It had doubled. If the increase in strength to the 4th stage of the undead realm also doubled, Muronyu's supreme quality saint artifacts would not be enough. He would need another one. Moreover, it was a conservative estimate. Until now, Muronyu still could not figure out why the energy he needed to break through was so terrifying. Was it because he had 2 more saint godheads than others? Then again, those 3 saint godheads did not require much energy. In fact, Muronyu was well aware that this was all because of his chaotic celestial body physique. Continue. While Muronyu was cultivating, more and more people flew over from the White Sun City, patrolling the vicinity of the Bloodrain Mountain, watching from afar. But no one dared to take half a step into the Bloodrain Mountain. The news of Muronyu's massacre at the Bloodrain Mountain had long spread. Although Muronyu was not in their sight, who knew if his soul force had spread throughout this area? If they rashly charged in, their souls might be annihilated by Muronyu. Therefore, although many people want to go in and pick up scraps, no one dared to take half a step into the lightning pool. He's out. The crowd suddenly became restless. Then, everyone saw Muronyu step out from the Blood Rain Mountain's treasury. 3rd Order Undead Realm. When they saw Muronyu, some people with higher cultivation than him couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. Many people had seen Muronyu enter the treasury when he was only a 1st Order Undead Realm cultivator. But in less than 2 hours after entering the treasury, he had broken through 2 small realms. What kind of treasures were inside the Blood Rain Mountain's treasury? Could there be a holy pill that could directly raise one's cultivation? Everyone looked at Muronyu with burning desire in their eyes. They swallowed their saliva inwardly, but it was just a thought, and no one dared to make a move. Big scoundrel, you've broken through again. Peak of the 3rd Order Undying Realm. Who knows? You might be able to break through to the imperishable realm before you reach the true martial temple. Seeing Muronyu appear, the little lowly couldn't help jumping up in shock. If only it were that easy. Muronyu rolled his eyes and said helplessly, after entering the 3rd Order Undead Realm, Muronyu still had 11 top-grade sacred tools in his hands. But after refining these 11 top-grade sacred tools, he could only raise his cultivation to the peak of the 3rd Order Undead Realm. Even if he refined dozens of top-grade sacred tools, he still couldn't break through and reach the peak of the Undead Realm. If it was an ordinary person, the 20 top-grade sacred tools could at least raise their cultivation to the high level of the Undead Realm, or even break through to the Undead Realm. However, if this was the case, Muronyu's desire to join the true martial temple was even stronger. Only a major force of that level would have all kinds of top-grade sacred tools and other treasures of heaven and earth. If he was a rogue cultivator, his speed of improving his strength would be as slow as a snail. Let's go. Muronyu glanced at the surrounding saints and frowned slightly. With a wave of his hand, everyone was instantly enveloped by an incomparably powerful force. Then, he turned into a stream of light and tore through the void, shooting into the distance and quickly disappearing. Whoosh! After Muronyu and others left, the saints who had been impatient for a long time rushed in like a swarm of bees. One by one, they began to look for the treasures that they might have missed. Half a day later, God, send down a tribulation thunder and kill that bastard Murong Yu. He's too shameless. He didn't even leave me a single sacred pill. He's so looted. Such a powerful person is actually so shameless. For a moment, countless people roared to the sky. That was because they couldn't even get a single hair here. Murong Yu had plundered everything in the Blood Rain Mountain. How could this not make them angry? A few days later, Murong Yu and others arrived at the Heavenly Crow City. The Heavenly Crow City was the same as the Left Origin City. It couldn't even be compared to the White Sun City. After Murong Yu and others arrived quietly, they bought a manor. Murong Yu didn't destroy the Great Dragon Sect, nor did he guide Shenzhen's disciples to ascend. With Murong Yu's current strength, it was still a little difficult. Once Shenzhen was exposed, he would be killed by the experts. That was a scene that Murong Yu didn't want to see. Therefore, he brought Yu Mengqing and others to the Heavenly Crow City. He wanted to go to the true martial temple, and Yu Mengqing and others weren't strong enough yet. Even if they went together, it would be useless. Although they could always cultivate in Hechu Luoshu. Hechu Luoshu wasn't the holy world after all. After considering for a while, they decided to temporarily stay in the Heavenly Crow City. Because of the lack of time, Murong Yu only stayed in the Heavenly Crow City for 3 days. After spending a few days with Yu Mengqing, Mu Liyue, Kerlan, and Sidu Xian, the 4 women, he had to leave. However, when he found little Loli, he found that little Loli had a depressed look on her face. "Big baddie, I can't go to the true martial temple with you," little Loli said with a sad face. She had a reluctant look on her face. Murong Yu was surprised. He had never seen little Loli with such an expression. "I'm going home." Hearing this, Murong Yu's enormous divine sense spread out. It covered the entire Heavenly Crow City. However, he didn't find anything. He guessed that little Loli must have sneaked out. With her personality, she definitely wouldn't go back by herself. Now that she wanted to go back, it must be her family's elders. However, to his disappointment, he didn't find little Loli's elders. It must be that they were too strong, so Murong Yu couldn't find them. After speaking a few words with Murong Yu, little Loli went to say goodbye to the other women. After a long time, little Loli finally rose into the air and flew out of the Heavenly Crow City. Seeing little Loli's figure quickly becoming smaller, Murong Yu suddenly felt a little uncomfortable. "Big baddie, don't forget about me. We will meet again soon." After little Loli's figure disappeared from Murong Yu and the other's sight, her fierce voice suddenly sounded in his ears. Murong Yu, who was a little disappointed, couldn't help but laugh. Finally, after sorting out his feelings, he also bid farewell to the others and left the Heavenly Crow City. He flew towards the true martial Holy Empire. Chapter 1346. The true martial temple was one of the most famous cultivation holy lands of the human race. It was located at the center of the true martial holy country on True Martial Mountain. 10 years. It took Murong Yu 10 years to reach True Martial Mountain from the 9 in holy country. And that was because he had been using teleportation arrays to travel between major cities. If he had been flying, he might not have been able to reach here even after 100 years. One could imagine how big the holy world was. However, what made Murong Yu depressed was that there were too few teleportation arrays in the holy world. Small cities like White Sun City didn't have any teleportation arrays at all. This was because the cost of constructing a teleportation array in the holy world was too high. The income from teleportation arrays in small places wasn't even enough to cover the cost of maintaining them. Moreover, not everyone was qualified to use the teleportation arrays in major cities. If one didn't reach a certain realm, they wouldn't be allowed to use them. It didn't matter how many Saint Crystals one paid. Because of this, Murong Yu could use most teleportation arrays. However, he couldn't teleport too far. So, after 10 years, he finally arrived at the true martial holy country. Murong Yu felt a little excited as he looked at the majestic martial mountain that pierced through the clouds. "I hope I'm not too late. Otherwise, it'll be a tragedy," Yu thought to himself as he flew up true Martial Mountain. Yu didn't know the rules of true Martial Mountain, so he didn't dare to fly here. If he offended some despicable people because of this, he wouldn't be able to join the true Martial Temple. Although he didn't care about the cultivation techniques here, he did care about the various treasures in the true Martial Temple. Su was extremely fast. It didn't take long for him to reach the peak of true Martial Mountain. A huge square appeared in his line of sight. The square was filled with a sea of people. At a glance, there were heads everywhere. Further away from the square, there was an endless stretch of tall mountains. Clouds and mist lingered, and the scenery was beautiful. Huge buildings soared into the sky. Dazzling rays of light faintly appeared from the clouds. Those were the rays of light emitted by the experts of the true Martial Temple. Those endless mountain ranges should be the real, true Martial Temple, right? Or perhaps it was just the periphery of the true Martial Temple. Yu was deeply moved by these big sections. Just like Shenzhen in the immortal world or the God Realm. They could see Shenzhen from afar, but they could only see the periphery of Shenzhen. This was because the entire Shenzhen was enveloped by various formations. An outsider's vision and divine sense could not penetrate it all. This way, not only could it prevent outsiders from prying into the sect, it could also give people a mysterious feeling. An aura as vast as the ocean constantly emanated from the true Martial Sacred Hall before condensing into an enormous torrent in the air. It radiated far away, intimidating the myriad worlds. It was as if a prehistoric ferocious beast was entrenched here. Yu couldn't help but be shocked when he saw it for the first time. I wonder if these people in the square are going to join the Outer Palace disciples or become odd job disciples. Yu flew down and rushed into the square. But they should all be odd job disciples of the true Martial Temple, right? They are all saints in the undead stage. The square was filled with people. There were no less than 10 million people. The rays of light emitted from their bodies were different in intensity, but they were all in the undead stage. After entering the square, Yu discovered a fact. The day of the true Martial Temple's recruitment of Outer Palace disciples had passed. Today was the last day of the recruitment of odd job disciples. When he heard this news, Yu couldn't help but sigh in relief. If he had come a day later, it would have been a tragedy. In the human race, other than the true Martial Temple, there were only a few other holy lands that wanted to join. However, the conditions of those holy lands to recruit disciples were similar. Either they had already recruited disciples, or they hadn't arrived yet. Brother, are you also here to join the true Martial Temple? You are only in the 3rd level of the undead stage. So many people want to compete for those few positions. The difficulty is not ordinary. Not long after Yu arrived at the square, a thin and skinny young man walked up to him and said enthusiastically. Yu nodded and didn't say anything. However, this thin and weak young man was very friendly. He started talking again. The true Martial Temple is really worthy of being the leader of the human race's holy lands. Even the odd job disciples have so many people coming to sign up. I only heard about it before, but I didn't believe it. By the way, brother, where are you from? My name is Fan Jian. Yu was looking at the square while listening to Fan Jian. When he heard his name, he couldn't help but burst out laughing. So he withdrew his gaze and looked at Fan Jian while holding back his laughter. This Fan Jian and Fan Tong had the same surname, and their names were so strange. If there was a chance, he would introduce them. Laugh. Everyone who knows my name for the first time can't help but laugh. Fan Jian said gloomily. Ha! Yu really couldn't help but laugh. At the same time, he couldn't help but pat Fan Jian's shoulder. Your name is very good. It's similar to my brother's name. Fan Jian was originally depressed, but after hearing Yu's words, his eyes lit up. What's your brother's name? Fan Tong, Fan Gang, Fan Shao. Yu said while holding back his laughter. Ha ha! Fan Jian suddenly looked up and laughed. Then the surrounding people looked at them as if they were looking at a lunatic. Yu didn't know why Fan Jian was laughing, So he took 2 steps back with a black face. He looked like he didn't know this guy. I thought my name was already good enough, but I didn't think there would be a name as good as mine. Brother, what's your name? When are you going to introduce me to your brothers? This guy actually had an excited look. Could it be that he found a soulmate? My name is Murongyu. Fantong and the others aren't here right now. If there's a chance, I'll definitely introduce them to you. Murongyu walked back and said with a smile. Fan Jian laughed. Are all these people going to participate in the test? How many odd job disciples does the true martial temple recruit each time? Murongyu's understanding of the true martial temple was based on the little lowly's words. It could be said that he didn't have any understanding of the true martial temple. You don't know? Fan Jian looked at Murongyu with a surprised look. Murongyu smiled embarrassedly. I just heard that the true martial temple is going to start recruiting flutes, so I hurried over. I really don't know anything. The true martial temple recruits 1 million odd job disciples each time. Murongyu nodded. A few tenths, it shouldn't be difficult to pass. Fan Jian shook his head. Although it's not difficult to become an odd job disciple of the true martial temple. But don't think that becoming an odd job disciple means that you'll be an odd job disciple of the true martial temple forever. If you can't break through to the imperishable stage in 1 million years, then go back where you came from. Break through to the imperishable stage in 1 million years from the undying stage? Isn't this condition too loose? Murongyu said in surprise. However, before he could finish his sentence, Zhou Wenwu felt many gazes land on him with a swish. Every one of their gazes contained traces of killing intent. Murongyu was really shocked this time. He didn't know how he offended these people. It was indeed not difficult to break through to the imperishable stage in 1 million years from the undying stage. But he forgot that he wasn't an ordinary person. If it was really so easy, then there wouldn't be any weaklings in the holy world. Every one of them was at the level of the primal chaos ancestor sage. No one would die because they couldn't enter the undying stage because their lifespan would run out. No one would be stuck in the undying stage for the rest of their lives. In fact, those who could cultivate to the undying stage were considered geniuses. And to break through to the imperishable stage in 1 million years, that was a peerless genius, a peerless monstrous existence. Loose. Do you know how many odd job disciples automatically leave the true martial temple every year? Do you know how many odd job disciples of the true martial temple become outer palace disciples every time? Fan Jian's voice became sharp. Very few? Murongyu frowned slightly. Very few. Among 1 million people, those who can break through to the imperishable stage in 1 million years are definitely not more than 2 digits. Fan Jian said loudly. But when he said this, his face became gloomy. Obviously, even if he became an odd job disciple of the true martial temple, he wasn't confident that he could break through to the imperishable stage in 1 million years. Even if he was already in the 6th level of the undying stage. Even those who were at the peak of the undying stage weren't confident. After all, there were too many people who were stuck at the peak of the undying stage and couldn't step into the imperishable stage. Isn't there another way to become an outer palace disciple? Murongyu couldn't help but ask. Fan Jian nodded. There is such a way. The true martial temple recruits disciples every 100,000 years. After the recruitment, a competition will be held. Anyone who can get into the top 10 can become an outer palace disciple. Moreover, apart from this method, you can also challenge an outer palace disciple at the imperishable stage. As long as you defeat them, you can become an outer palace disciple. At this point, Fan Jian paused for a moment before he said with a bitter smile, outer palace disciples are always stronger. Moreover, after becoming a disciple of the true martial temple, they're even stronger than before. It's almost impossible for an undying stage to challenge an imperishable stage, and they're even stronger. Basically, no odd job disciple can challenge an outer palace disciple and advance. Murongyu's eyes lit up. Others couldn't challenge someone at a higher level, but he could. As long as he became an odd job disciple, then he could challenge an outer palace disciple at the imperishable stage and become an outer palace disciple. This rule was simply tailor-made for him. Chapter 1347. While Morong Yu and Fan Jian were discussing, a cold voice was heard. The odd job disciple test will begin now. One by one. Whoosh! Immediately, the huge square, which was originally extremely noisy, instantly fell silent. Everyone's gaze followed the source of the voice. Morong Yu also looked over, only to see that the person who spoke was a young woman dressed in black. She was quite good-looking, but her expression was as cold as 10,000-year-old ice. It made people involuntarily want to leave, as if strangers were not allowed to get close to her. If this was not her original temperament, then she must have cultivated an ice attribute cultivation method. This senior sister should be an outer hall disciple who is here to preside over the odd job disciple test, Fan Jian whispered to Morong Yu. Morong Yu nodded and asked curiously, "How is the test going to be conducted? It's difficult for tens of millions of people to complete the test in a day, right?" While Morong Yu was speaking, the people in front of him had already entered the huge hall in front of them. In fact, before Fan Jian could answer Morong Yu had already seen people file out from the other side of the hall dejectedly. What's going on? Morong Yu was immediately stunned. Could it be that they had only walked one round in the main hall before they were eliminated? How was the test going to be conducted? It was actually so fast. Then, Morong Yu observed for a while and found that almost all of the 10 people who entered the hall had come out. There wasn't even a single person left. Perhaps there would only be one person left in the hall after 20 or even 30 of them. Therefore, he looked at Fan Jian next to him. Fan Jian shook his head and said, "It said that the test method is different every time. I don't know what method will be used this time." Morong Yu nodded and did not say anything else. Anyway, it will be his turn soon. The procession moved at an extremely fast speed. It was almost as if they had walked one round in the main hall before coming out. Although the people who came out were dejected, they didn't complain about anything and just left the Martial Mountain. There was no benefit in fooling around here. Any random disciple from the true Martial Temple could easily kill him. Even if they couldn't become odd jobs disciples, they still had another chance. In less than half a day, Morong Yu and Fan Jian walked into the main hall. There were 10,000 people who entered with him. Time acceleration? As soon as he stepped into the hall, Morong Yu was shocked. This was because the flow of time in this hall was clearly different from the flow of time outside. After roughly sensing the Morong Yu, he felt that the flow of time in this hall was actually 10,000 times faster than outside, or even a little faster. No wonder those people left so quickly. Even if they stayed here for an entire day, it would only be a blink of an eye outside. Morong Yu pondered in his heart as he looked around the hall. The test this time is very simple. You only need to cross that bridge to become an odd job disciple. Just at this moment, the cold voice from before sounded out. Morong Yu looked over and saw a small bridge surrounded by clouds in the center of the hall. Below the bridge was a deep ravine that divided the hall into two halves. On the other side of the bridge, there were a few people scattered around. There seemed to be tens of thousands of them. Morong Yu's eyes flashed with a sharp light. Those people should be the ones who crossed the bridge, which meant that they were already qualified to become odd job disciples. However, the number was really shocking. It was not too many, but too few. It should be known that Morong Yu was at the back of the line, and there were tens of thousands of people behind him. However, even if all of them crossed this bridge, they would not be able to gather 100,000 people. What's so special about this bridge? Morong Yu narrowed his eyes slightly and looked at the small bridge surrounded by clouds. At the same time, the others had already risen into the air and stepped on the small bridge. The moment Morong Yu stepped on the bridge, the scenery in front of him changed. Then, he saw himself appear on a gigantic bridge that seemed to stretch across the void. The entire bridge was surrounded by clouds and mist, and he could not see his fingers in front of him. "I like to see what's so special about this bridge." Morong Yu hesitated in his heart, but his feet did not hesitate to walk forward. Suddenly, Morong Yu felt the scenery in front of him change again. The next moment, he found himself in Murong's house. He had also become a thin and weak child who was only a few years old. At this moment, he was in a dilapidated courtyard, being beaten and kicked by a few young men who were the same age, but were much stronger than him. While beating Murong, these children constantly scolded him. Little bastard, bastard, trash, and all kinds of insults. Seeing this scene, Murong was enraged. Boundless killing intent burst out from him and shot straight to the nine heavens. You all deserve to die. Murong let out a low roar as he sent a punch out, wanting to kill the children on the spot. But at this moment, he suddenly reacted. While he was about to attack, he suppressed the anger in his heart. This is just an illusion. Murong suddenly woke up. The scene he saw just now really did happen. And the person who was beaten was him when he was a teenager. But that was all in the past. As for the children who beat him, they were probably already dead. This bridge could make people fall into an illusion and return to the past. Murong's face was a little ugly. There were many things in his past that were extremely unbearable. Especially before entering the cultivation world, he was a trash in his family. Even a servant could bully him at will. And after entering the cultivation world, as his strength continued to grow, he gradually took control of his own fate. My fate is in my own hands, not in the hands of the heavens. Murong suddenly roared in his heart. Then he strode forward. Murong vaguely guessed the reason why the true martial temple used the bridge for the test. This was to let them face their own hearts and maintain their own hearts. On the path of cultivation, only by maintaining one's own heart would one be able to go further and further on this path. Of course, there were two kinds of people who could maintain their own hearts. One was a normal person. They would also feel ashamed because of some things, but they could control their own hearts very well. The other was an evil person. They had killed millions of people, but they didn't feel any guilt. This kind of human-level evil person was extremely terrifying, because no matter what he had done in the past, it wouldn't affect his own heart. Therefore, this kind of person's strength increased extremely quickly. Seeing that Murong was restraining himself from making a move, the true martial temple's outer palace disciples couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. This was because the moment Murong stepped forward, the illusion he'd created had already been destroyed. And those who walked on this bridge would usually be eliminated in the first illusion. Even if they weren't eliminated, those people would be immersed in the first illusion for a long time before breaking out. Murong, on the other hand, was the only one who could shatter the illusion in less than a few breaths of time. Senior Sister Zhongli, this person's heart is so strong. Do you think he can successfully cross the bridge? On the other side of the hall, an outer hall disciple said to the woman in black with a cold expression. The woman in black just looked indifferently at Murong, who was striding on the bridge, but didn't say a word. That disciple was rebuffed and also looked at Murong. However, when he saw Murong striding forward without any pause, he couldn't help but widen his eyes. On the bridge, there was an illusion with each step. If one could complete the bridge, then the number of illusions one experienced would be uncountable. This was because these illusions were from the beginning of memory until now. However, Murong's footsteps didn't even stop, which meant that these illusions couldn't affect him at all. Murong's family, the cultivation world, the immortal world, the God world, and then the sacred world. Illusions kept appearing one after another, either killing people or parting. However, Murong maintained his heart from beginning to end. He didn't even need to destroy these illusions, and they were automatically destroyed. It didn't take long for Murong to reach the end of the bridge. So fast, everyone in the hall was shocked when they saw Murong walking straight on the bridge without any hesitation. Whether it was the outer hall disciples of the true martial temple or the service disciples who successfully crossed the bridge, every single one of them had crossed this bridge before, so they could empathize with it. They knew how difficult it was to cross this bridge. However, the obstacles that stopped them from becoming disciples of the true martial temple didn't seem to affect Murong at all. Aside from Murong, The others who had stepped onto the bridge with him had either been swept off or were still struggling in the first illusion. The only relatively strong person, Fan Jian, was only a quarter of the way through the bridge. How can his heart be so strong? Everyone was shocked. The last trial, as long as he passes this, he'll become a service disciple. The service disciples discussed spiritedly. I wonder if he can pass this trial? The service disciples looked at each other. In fact, the majority of the people who passed the bridge weren't limited to just a few tens of thousands of them. However, a significant portion of them were eliminated at the last trial. Even though they passed the first trial, they didn't know what the last trial was. There were no illusions or anything else. They felt it and passed just like that. However, they didn't believe that there was nothing at the last trial. Otherwise, why would so many people be eliminated at this stage? This brat's heart is extremely strong. If he can pass the last trial, it won't be a problem for him to rise in the temple in the future. He passed the bridge in less than a quarter of an hour. Our so-called saints and saintesses aren't as strong as him, right? An outer hall, disciple chuckled at Murong Yu, who was at the end of the bridge. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.